Excellent, thank you. All right, good morning. I'd like to call to order the February 4th, 2023 Lake Washington School Board study session. Let the record reflect that all board members are present. We do have Director Carlson is remote for this meeting. Our topic, we have one topic today, sustainability. So we're pretty excited. We've been talking about this for a while, and we now have the opportunity to learn a little more. And so with that, I'm going to pass it to Dr. Holman.
Great, and as I'm providing some opening comments, I'll just ask the board to log into board docs because I am going to ask for some time just to spend going through our public comments and just ask the board, like, what are the things that you've heard over the last couple of months from community comments as kind of a lead-in to our day today, because I think it's important to the board has had this on our work plan for the year. We've talked about this. It's okay. You know, the board has talked about this for a number of years. We put sustainability in the legislative platform this year, which, as you know, has been beneficial to our overall work and advocacy with our local delegation and some of the bills that we're testifying to. And so within board docs, there's, if you go into, I believe it's the agenda portion, there is a link to all of the comments that have been received over the last, I'm just going to say 6 to 8 weeks. I don't recall exactly when sustainability kind of public comments started coming in, but if you would pull that up, that would be helpful. And so just a review of, Jen, if you go to the next slide, a review of our agenda today. I tried to put a sort of an agenda together, just kind of taking a moment to review sustainability, just to orient ourselves to what we're talking about today. Part of that is orienting ourselves to the comments that have come in from the public. I was looking for a video that described sustainability, and I found a couple, and then I decided not to have that be part of our session today for a couple of reasons. One, anything we share today feels like we're publicly saying this is what sustainability is or is not, and I didn't want to take that step because the world of comments around sustainability are quite vast. And so creating an operational definition could be part of the work of the district, and as the board considers policy implications, the board may want to spend some time being clear about what we mean by sustainability and not. And so we're going to spend, about 20 minutes or so just orienting ourselves to community comment. And then from about 8:30 to 9:20, Dr. Rose has done a nice job of talking with our staff around some of the curriculum connections. She's gone into our curriculum to find, where are we actually teaching sustainability today? Where within our content standards do we find issues related to sustainability? Just to provide kind of a scope of what is. Dr. Rose also then went into some other areas to just pull out information that will help us understand kind of from the academic side of the house, how are we currently thinking about and addressing issues of sustainability. Dr. Rose pulled information around our King County Green schools, and just to provide an update around those data, Dale Cody then reached out to our secondary schools just to find out, just to get a quick snapshot, what are your students doing, what is your school doing related to sustainability. That information, again, it will provide kind of a broad brushstroke overview. I don't think it's to the level of detail to say we have a consistent program or not a consistent program at our secondary schools, because our elementary implementation of sustainability efforts is much different than at the secondary level from a few vantage points, and we'll talk about that. And so just wanted to orient the board to all of those, give us an opportunity to have that conversation. We'll take a break, and then we've invited, you can see we have 3 empty seats here right now. 2 of those empty seats you may not have met previously. They are part of our resource conservation management and sustainability supports through McKinstry. And I had asked Executive Director Buck to just ask them to can you capture really the efforts that we're doing as a district from really the operational lens related to sustainability. And Brian, Barbara, myself met with them last week, and it was helpful. It was impressive from the standpoint of this is the world that that they live in every day, that they think about, that they're focused on, and so they bring a different lens. And it was really helpful just to hear their voice talk about Lake Washington School District efforts related to the region, related to the country, and kind of where we stand as an organization. And so so they have a presentation. They'll be able to speak to that. They do work with districts all across the region around sustainability and resource conservation, and so they bring a very unique lens. And then the last portion of our agenda is really board discussion. It's the opportunity for the board to do some level setting as a governing body, describe some action items that you're thinking about. So Jen, will you go to the next slide? That's a bad yellow. It's green on my screen, but so I apologize. So I'll read it. I typically don't come into a study session and say, hey, we need to set some expectations, but I think it's important for this topic today, just because there's some things that today is about, and there are things that it's not about. Today really is about bringing to light the work that Lake Washington is doing. It's not saying that we have reached our target or that we've reached a milestone. It's just to say, here's what we're doing. Today is also about the board, and I'll just read that last one. It says, today is about the board members' discussion about possible policy changes or other formal actions related to sustainability. And I say that because today isn't about the district should go do X, Y, Z. You should develop a program at all schools. You should. And so it's not about that today. Today really is about the board, and really staff, because we've never done this to this degree before, just to level set to say this is what we're doing as a district. And then it gives the board the opportunity to then talk about, okay, if this is a value that we have and this is a commitment that we have, what is our work in really the visioning and leadership governance of the district, so that then as staff we can take that vision and make operational considerations. And so I just wanted to be clear that today isn't about operational changes. Today is really about providing information so that the board can do their work around conversation and policy development. Jen, will you go to the next slide? And so to that end, I think there's 2 specific outcomes. One is that the board learns. A study session will get into some very granular detail around sustainability today. There may be too much content, but I mean it's good stuff. And then that the board actually determines next steps. I think it's important that we walk out of this room with very clear next steps that the board desires, and it could be a number of things. 1, do nothing. That's all. That is an option the board has. 2, consider policy changes, adoption, rewrite. Those are all options. Developing a statement around sustainability. So there's a number of options, but I think being clear about that as we leave the room today would be helpful for the board, but also for staff as we partner with the board around these issues. Okay, and so you all have, and Shivani, I don't know if you have the document. If you don't, I will email it to you. The document around public comments around sustainability? You don't, okay. So I'll get that to you so you can review it. Siri, do you want to make any comments after my kind of opening set? Like, is there anything you would comment on or agree with or disagree with?
I would agree with what you said. So I just think the key piece is we're thinking about sort of where are we at. I mean, actually, we've done this with several different topics as we've worked through things. Equity would be the first one that I would come to. We know we had a variety of conversations earlier. And then at some point, we started saying we need to understand what's happening throughout the whole district. And then from that, started to set up what the stage was going forward. And so I think that's sort of the stage we're at now, is that learning component. And then I'm just excited we're finally doing it. So it's great to do that. And so let's go.
Yeah, and I think what we'll see today is there is some very positive things going on in Lake Washington, and there's opportunities, which is cool. So if you would take that document around public comments and just spend about 5 minutes just reorienting yourself to the comments, and then I think it would be nice for the board just like, what did you notice around the comments that you're seeing, just as we kind of set the stage for the day. And Shivani, I will get those to you. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so that was actually 5 minutes, if you can believe that. And so, if any one of the board members, and Chris, if you want to join in and make some comments as well, feel free to unmute and we'll jump to you. But does anyone want to start us off? Yeah, just as maybe I'll give an example. So as I started reading through the comments again, I just started, for me, I like to identify themes. And so for me, themes, there's a lot of theme comments around food. And from the food that's provided to the time allotted to be able to actually eat the food that's provided, and then how we're dealing with the waste. And so I just kind of, for me, just categorize that as, kind of the management of kind of food and waste related to lunch. So that's my opening comment. Eric?
Go.
You too. One of the themes was around student learning as it's connected to sustainability and the opportunities for students to learn about, not just about sustainability, but I think there was sort of an underlying like systems way of thinking that was throughout all of this. So thinking about, how our actions, could fit into a systems approach. So that's one. Should I keep going? Or I'll hold. I'll let other people.
Shivani?
I was going to say almost the same thing. Like, I noticed a lot of themes around food waste and just, like, the learning around food waste, because I did see a lot of comment about how a lot of students don't really know how to compost correctly. And then I also saw a couple of comments about funding for composting and how they did not have the money to have compost bags at their schools. So I think that would be a good next step.
Well, I think that the concept of composting, it starts really with the learning curve, if you will. The idea of having perhaps student volunteers saying, okay, no, this is where your compost goes. I'm reminded years ago of an office that I was in that had a recycling bin and a trash bin, and people were getting very uptight about the fact that if someone got the wrong one. Then I noticed as I worked late one night that the janitors were dumping it all in the same box. So it's really a matter of coordination. And if you want to have this program, it's great, and we should have a program. But let's coordinate. Let's not assume it's someone else's responsibility to help us with this. As the saying goes, we're all in this together. So we all have to do our part. We make available the bags. You make available your efforts to coerce your fellow students to cooperate or convince, whatever we'd like to use. And it becomes a matter of being able to work together to enlighten each person. I don't think people realize, or they are leaving the cafeteria in a rush and they just dump it in the first place they can. Takes a little bit of getting used to. But I don't think it's a matter of not wanting to. I think it's a matter of, comes down to school and education. Educating each other, teachers, staff, students, administrators, board.
Okay. Leah, we're just going to round robin and keep going around to our out of comments.
I think a theme that popped out at me was kind of the inconsistencies between locations at our schools. So there seems to be a lot of great things happening at very specific schools, not systemically overall. It's not, at least it's not called out that way in our public comments. So there's like very concrete examples associated with a very specific location. Or challenges associated with a very specific location that's coming out.
I see a lot about set some clear goals, give some vision, some direction, have the board make commitment. Shivani? Chris, I didn't see your hand. I apologize. Thank you. All right, Shivani.
Okay, kind of adding on to what everyone just said, I think what's currently going on in the district is the responsibility of sustainability is being placed on the students, and I don't think it's fair to give them that burden of caring for their future. I think there needs to be some kind of initiative that kind of puts everything together and aids students in helping, but doesn't just put the responsibility on them to help.
Eric.
So thematically, I think one thing that came out of one way that our community thinks about sustainability is the actions we can take as a district to lessen or mitigate the negative impacts that our operations have on the long-term environment. That seems like there's sort of different concepts of sustainability embedded in here, but that is one, I'd say, dominant concept that's in there.
One of the things I think before we assume that one school is doing more than another, and maybe this will come up later in the day, I don't know, but we need to know what levels at each school we're at. Do we have a compost barrel set up, if you will, at each of the schools? Do we have in place an effort to encourage each other to use the compost and make sure we're throwing the right item in the right can? I'd like to know that we've got some letters here, that's great, and we know that X school is doing it and Y school maybe not doing it, but we don't know, that's not all 50-some odd schools we've got. And I'd like to know where they're at. In the same mode, from an operational standpoint, we need to go through the buildings that we have and say these efforts have been made in X number of buildings, whether it's the solar panels on one school or the HVAC system that's been made, upgraded to be more conducive to the environment, or any other of the efforts that are done. So we have a baseline to know where we started. Otherwise, we're just kind of swinging in the wind here and flailing around and saying one school has it better when we really don't know. Because I'd hate to say that, okay, we have a director of sustainability, but we've got 45 out of 50-some odd schools doing it. Okay, folks, let's figure out where we're at before we start going on to where we want to be. That doesn't mean we can't work towards it at the same time. But let's make sure we know where we're going and what we need to do. That way we don't waste any money. This is all about waste, and money is as good a place to start as any.
I would just say that there seems to be it's an ask or a plea more like for a comprehensive approach. It isn't just the curriculum and teaching our students about it, and it's not just about the food and what's happening in our cafeteria. It's the facilities, it's our impact on the environment, it's where our food is coming from. Like, they're asking for a very comprehensive approach to sustainability, and I think it comes out in the different comments because everybody is focusing on some different aspect.
So as you hear the different themes, the other piece that I just keep is I keep thinking goals. Sorry, it's my need a plan, need a footprint. The sense of urgency is, I think, a piece that comes out through here. Of it's time to move. It's time to make this clear and move forward, and that there are a lot of partners within our community who are ready to support that work, who are experts in that area, who are more than willing to be able to help direct, guide, provide assistance, because they already have. We have lots of it. The other piece that is our buses, transportation, and electric vehicles. That has come out, and actually we'd had discussion on this probably 3 years ago. We had some students who came and had talked about doing this. So that this topic has come up in little pieces over the years, and now this is a bigger piece to it. But I do think urgency and action is being requested. Chris, do you have anything else?
Nope, I've heard everything.
Okay, so before we do another round, I'm going to toss it out to open. Any other things that you have seen through there that have not been said? Okay, so Shivani, let me just check. We'll just do another round. Shivani?
I have nothing right now. Could you come back to me?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Eric?
Doesn't stop me from talking.
Or me.
Just explicitly, I don't sure anyone said this yet. Carbon emissions. I mean, there is a lot of talk about climate change, and so we've talked about the role our district, the negative impacts our district may have, or our operations may have on long-term environment. But one specifically is the carbon emissions, and Siri touched on that. Talking about, I'd imagine our transportation fleet is a big part of that. But
All right, Mark.
oh, sorry.
Oh, wait, Eric has
Sorry,
one
I
more.
was gonna
Go.
do my last thing.
Get them all out.
Yeah. And then just the other concept that came out was just in general this sort of like minimizing waste generated by the district. Common theme.
Mark?
Well, I think on the carbon emissions, yes, it's going to be great when we get to a point where we can have electric vehicles for our electric-powered vehicles for our bus fleet. And, in fact, that came up with our discussions yesterday with Congresswoman Del Bene's staff. We had identified the fact that every grant we'd applied for had been denied because we didn't fit one category or another, and they are willing to work with us to identify grant programs that we may not have even realized existed. And not only that, but when we fill them out, perhaps give us some aid as to how to fill them out to make sure that we are crossing our T's and dotting our I's. The other thing, too, to keep in mind, as we look at ways to save on buses, and we looked save emissions on buses, and we looked at the idea of having a longer or a wider border for the walk-to-school border as opposed to the picking up a bus border, we can't have that. Making that effort's great, and we should, but then we can't replace it with mom and dad taking us to the school and dropping us off and having a mile-long drop-off line. We have to then look at how, in a reasonable way, we encourage walking. We often talking about the walking school bus where a group of kids get together with a parent or two. We've also talked about the idea of the physical education aspect of it, or the making sure that that we encourage the exercise. To be quite frank, well, that'd be great. So let's look at all the aspects. Let's not just focus on one or two. We need to be comprehensive, and it's not a matter of finger pointing at any point in time. It's a matter of saying, okay, here's the problems. How can each of us address it, as opposed to putting the burden on one or two or three. Giovanni had mentioned putting all the burden on the students, but to be quite frank, students have a burden, teachers have a burden, we have a burden, and the idea is to work together to make sure that no burden is too tough on one individual or one group of individuals.
I guess the last thing I had was, I know there's a lot of work to do, but there's already so much work happening, and it was kind of awesome to see in the comments. I know a lot of it is not complaining, but wishing for things that could be better. But it also highlighted a lot of the work that is being done, and I thought that that was actually really encouraging.
And as sort of my last, I really appreciate the sustainability ambassador's letter that was sent and sort of the very clarity that's in there and sort of how that's laid out and really does set sort of that comprehensive concepts. And I think that's the piece that just keeps coming out of here is lots going on. How do you start to shape that and how do you start to align everything into the same direction so we can get to a carbon neutral, so we do make our world a better place, and that we as a district, there's the education of our students, there is also the modeling of what we do as an organization in setting an example going forward. So I think those are all things that sort of come out of here. And now's the time, I think, is the other piece that I get out of here.
Okay, so the last thing I saw was that a lot of the public comment talked about how students are willing to help, but a lot of the time the staff members aren't exactly supportive or they don't really know how to help. So I think starting like educating not only students but also staff members would be really helpful to help have that change be sustained instead of just like having it last for a bit and then like not being taken further.
That, I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you for the opportunity. I think that was great to be able to walk through those again.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the next portion of our agenda, Dr. Rose will walk through a variety of different curriculum connections. And so I don't know how we want to moderate this, if you want to, because there's kind of sections. And so I wonder if, as we get to the next section, if we just pause for any questions that the board has and then kind of move through the presentation in that format. It's all you.
Thank you. Okay. I can never repeat myself. It just keeps on going. So kindergarten, we really start with students to feel empowered and locally to think about how they fit into a community garden in a way that really benefits human beings and the environment. Those concepts are somewhat integrated, or they repeat again in second grade, but they're really specifically called out again in third grade. And taking that next step, as biomimicry engineers, students learn how an organism's traits can affect survivability in an environment. And they, again, are really thinking about that in their immediate context of then removing invasive plants and thinking about that interaction between humans and the environment and ways that they, again, are empowered to be thinking about it in that way. And then in fifth grade, they work as water resource engineers, and they look at a water shortage problem in an area and design possible solutions. So they're, again, thinking about how they're looking at their local environment and how they're empowered to be thinking about how to make it better, the interaction between humans and the environment. This is a big difference from FOSS. That was our former science curriculum, and FOSS had, I think it was water tables in 5th grade, and they were really looking at erosion, but it was almost in isolation, like just what happens with water and dirt. And so to now really be thinking not just what's the science concept that happens, but what's the science concept that happens that we have to think about as it impacts our world. So that's where the sustainability connections show up in elementary school science. That's been, like I said, a very empowering change for teachers to think about how they can extend those projects with their students, but it has been something that they've chosen where that fits best. In middle school, we adopted new curriculum. So science, again, the new science standards came in 2013. We adopted new science curriculum in I believe it was 2015 or 2016. And that was early enough that we've really needed to put some work into early enough in the new standards that we've really needed to put some work into thinking about how our curriculum and what our teachers do supports the science standards. So where sustainability shows up are in these 3 different, these aren't units, they're clumps of standards. And the NGSS standards they're different from standards before NGSS or before Common Core, where they don't really focus in on discrete pieces of knowledge. They focus in on ways of thinking. So they focus in on engineering practices. There's some discrete pieces of knowledge in there, but they really focus in on most importantly, how are we thinking about the information in front of us, the trends that we see in front of us, the patterns, and then what do we do about it? The other piece that's really important in the standards is thinking about the logic and the interpretation of data and the application of critical thinking. So with the units that come up in middle school science, and depending on the schools, these can land at different parts of the year, they look at renewable and non-renewable resources. They think, and this I think is an important one, that second clump of standards, they construct arguments, which is really important because they're evaluating information and thinking about how it applies. And then in the last clump of standards, they're specifically looking at climate change and investigating the factors with climate change. One of the big things that we've been doing in middle school science for the past 2 years to make sure that teachers not only have resources, but the ability to collaborate with each other so that their instruction is really focused and timely. There's a open educational resource, so something that's provided. Open educational resource is something that's provided free to educators or free to anyone who wants it. There are different levels of quality to that. The Open SciEd resources have been something that OSPI has really worked on and supported pretty profoundly in thinking specifically about climate change. And they are a set of units that are available at middle school, and they're now developing for high school, that are problem-based, that are dynamic and current, and really interesting and focused on what are important issues for the world. Our district has been participating in lots of the professional learning that OSPI has offered. They've offered collaboration sessions. They've offered like multi-day learning sessions over the summer where we've had specialists, including our technology integration specialists, have gone to these learning sessions. We've had teachers go to it, so we have many teachers in the district that are at the train-the-trainer level for the Open SciEd resources. And at this point, we started calling it a pilot for supplemental resources, and we've had every middle school has middle school teachers involved in this pilot. So we're more like, it's kind of a rollout. And it was started as voluntary. We just said, who's interested? Because there are so many things that teachers are called to do that we couldn't say we're mandating everyone do this. And the interest was so strong that it's present in every middle school and really positively received. And what's powerful about those units is that they are integrated and they are timely and they are located in local phenomena. So that's been a really exciting piece for middle school. There's also some, and I think this will come up later when we talk about school involvement, there's multiple projects that, again, central office, we know some of them, but not all of them. And I know the board has heard some in board comments, but the project that's at Rose Hill Middle School, where science teachers are partnering with the city of Kirkland and with the forest with the forest sustainability, the projects that they're doing there are profound, impacting of students, involving of students, and one of those like lovely partnerships between multiple agencies to say, this issue is really important to all of us. How can we take action on it and support our students to be really empowered as they're going forward? So that's a specific one at Rose Hill, and Tim Voss in our professional learning department has really spearheaded that, which is, again, like a lovely example of multiple departments, multiple divisions, and organizations coming together to say this is important.
And just as a reminder, Tim is the staff member who came and provided public comment a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. And I apologize. I realized I just barged on into middle school without pausing at elementary school. So I can go back, or we can go through all three and come back? Okay, all right. Okay. And then so in high school, again, we have we did in 2017 was when we did a deep dive into looking at the new standards and thinking about where they fell best within our high school, essentially our required high school courses. That is kind of a loose term because graduation requirements require lab science, but they're not title specific. But the way that courses are set up and what colleges are looking for, most students end up taking biology in the Earth system, chemistry in the Earth system, and physics in the universe. One of the changes from the typical science, so we all probably grew up taking physics, biology, and chemistry, or not. Something like that over the past 30 plus years or so was pretty traditional in schools. And they were often really discrete. Like you would take biology and it'd be a set of learning. You take chemistry, it's a different set of learning. Physics, it's a different set of learning. The NGSS standards are far more integrated. And so it actually was a complex task to say, we're really still organizing around thinking around biology, but the standards reflect much more of what our students need for real life application, which they are complex and related to each other. So that's why when we retitled the courses 5 years ago, it became biology in the Earth system because we wanted to really call out, it's not biology as a separate, discrete set of like skills in a lab. These are applicable, important standards that relate all throughout the way that we think about the Earth and think about biology. And same thing with chemistry. It's not a discrete set of skills or knowledge that you play out in a lab or, at a specific site. These are things that impact our daily life. And so the change in that thinking around standards has been pretty profound, and we did an enormous amount of, I will say professional learning, but I'll also say collaboration, because the science teachers in our district are incredibly collaborative and thoughtful, and the learning that we often do is from each other and thinking about how we take these standards and have them be most relevant and most powerful for students. So that changed. Climate or sustainability connections show up in high school science in every course of every one of I'll call them our standard courses. There are many, many more courses, but it is again in that integrated way of how do these things play out across how chemistry impacts our water sources and how we think about waste treatment when it comes to biology in the Earth system. So those interactions and connections are built into the standards and then how we think about our curriculum. The next piece, and stop me if there's questions as we go through, the next piece, and this is, you heard about this a week ago, but our CTE department and our courses in CTE are direct, applied, I think fascinating, interesting, connected to secondary learning or to post-secondary learning into careers and thinking about how sustainability shows up directly in what our students might do and what exists in our world today. So some of the courses that our students have access to are Urban Agriculture 1 and 2. And we got to see some of those classrooms a couple weeks ago, which was wonderful to see students in just this wild environment and so excited about it. And the plans for taking that classroom learning that was transformed from a regular classroom into a greenhouse that was extending outside of it. And the students were talking about, and the teacher was talking about taking that learning to interacting with other schools and interacting with other agencies. So that was really wonderful. It's a wonderful option that our students have access to. AP Environmental Science, same thing. That's a fantastic course that has students thinking about everything from climate change to food scarcity to many issues that are really important in our world in a way that directly applies it in our world and leads to careers that they can have in college. And by the way, all of these get their students dual credit, so they're showing up into college with some wonderful learning and some credits. Marine science, again, same thing. Middle school food science and sustainability. I do remember way back in the day taking I think it was a home ec course. This is a very different course that yes, it's a very different course that again pulls in the concepts from our NGSS standards and pulls in the practicality and the immediate relevance, and thinking about how do we interact with thinking about food and our world in terms of sustainability. So that's in all of these, this is a passion area, as you can tell, for many of our teachers and many of our students and parents. And so the strength of leaning on the next generation science standards are that they really do emphasize science is important in many ways, but especially as it interacts with our personal lives and our daily experience and our impact on the larger world. So that is the overview.
The Q question and answers, and Chris, raise your hand if you do have one, and then we'll know to call on you. Any questions? Shivani?
Okay, so you mentioned that there are units in elementary school and middle school. I was wondering, do you know how long each of these units last? Like, are they a couple of weeks, a couple of months, or are they integrated throughout the entire curriculum?
That's a great question. So at our elementary level, there's between 5 and 6 units per, I'm remembering that, it's 4 to 6 units per grade level. So actually I think it's 4 to 5. So each grade level, it's about 9 weeks per unit. And the goal is, and that's when the kit will show up for 9 weeks. The teachers and the students have access to all of the curriculum all the time. We use a digital curriculum for the actual learning pieces of it, but the hands-on part shows up in a kit that we rotate through the different schools. So the concepts are the expectation is that they're taught within about a 9-week period. The ability for teachers to revisit and pull through is constant. And at middle school, the learning is organized around the standards, so teachers have professional judgment around how long each unit takes. And there's depending on the grade level, between 6 and 9 units at each grade level.
Okay, thank you.
How integrated into the other classes, into the other subject areas, are these units? I mean, I can see, okay, we've got 4 science units, but how does it then translate into the social studies unit, into the language arts unit? I'm not saying that all of a sudden our schools have to be totally themed and it goes only one way, but it helps when you look at it from a different perspective. When you look at it from a socioeconomic perspective, perhaps in your social studies. And also, it seems like, but I could be misinterpreting you, that you take it from the macro lectures really into the micro actions, if you will. And it needs to be almost, but the micro actions need to be something in their daily living, to be quite frank. Talking about soil erosion may not have the impact here that it has growing up in Oklahoma, where you can see the air around you because it's all filled with red dirt. And that's way beyond the Dust Bowl days. It still happens. But the point is, if the student really can't see it, touch it, feel it, taste it, or see it in their own lives, then it's still a little esoteric to them.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of questions you ask in there. I'll start with the last one. So thinking about the concept, I think the difference between our science learning expectations in the past and now, students still would learn about erosion, so like they would in the FOSS kits, but the important change is why that's important. I mean, to your point, why and where that's important. So it's not just here's the technical, like water and soil interact in this way, and we should care about that because is what we think about now.
Basically, what's in it for me?
Yeah. The other piece that you hit on is a really, really complex piece, and that is how do we find enough time to do everything that we want to do? So we actually had this past spring, and this is related to our work in inclusion, and it's true of every teacher is going to tell you there's not enough minutes in the day. Specifically, when we were thinking about inclusion this past spring, and we were looking for where are the minutes that we put in like tiered support interventions in blocks, we ended up doing a reevaluation of the number of minutes that each content area is budgeted in a week. And there's a bunch of thinking that kind of goes with that. So we just look technically at, like, what does each curriculum say the minutes are? And if you do that, you end up with more minutes than are in a week. So teachers are making judgments about where do we put our time, where do we put our interest and our efforts. So there's a tension around, are there enough minutes in the day? But that goes to the second point or the first point that you brought up, which was, how are these things integrated? That there doesn't need to be a science minute and a social studies minute, that they can often be those same pieces. And that is absolutely a goal of our system, and that's happening in different places. And I can jump around a little bit in this conversation, because that's something that we really wanted to talk about, is that as we are thinking about, we did our science adoption a couple years ago, and that really started looking at, in our science adoption, sustainability conversations show up in thinking about our since time immemorial curriculum. So when we were adopting science, it was a natural time to say, where's the overlap in the social studies, and thinking about where this interacts with tribal partnership and sustainability. So specifically at the elementary level, we've been working with Bellevue School District, and we've actually been working with the since time immemorial, with Snoqualmie Tribe and Native Education Coordinator, and then with our equity department and our student services department, to say, how can these pieces of learning be embedded? And with these different, it actually started with teachers. Fourth grade teachers, when we were adopting science, said we really need to be focusing in on how can we integrate these pieces. So with that, we started building out some optional K-5 lesson plans that integrate social studies and science. That's getting a lot more energy, and will be more specifically built into what we do going forward, because we're starting a K-5 social study. We're in the middle of the learning year of a K-5 social studies adoption. So that integration is always a goal, but it's the time and the resources to do that is a challenge. So there are pockets of that, like our writing curriculum. We wrote that ourselves about 7 years ago, and we based it on our Wonders curriculum, because the writing curriculum is really like a set of lessons and assessments and assignments that are built around existing curriculum resources. And we did that intentionally so we could say we can swap out those resources. So when we could use a chunk from Wonders, or we could use a chunk from Amplify Science, or we could use something from Since Time Immemorial, that when we really focus more on skills, when we're able to focus specifically and deeply on skills, then what we're reading can change. And so many of our teachers are actually doing writing lessons, like the persuasive writing assignments absolutely can be based on the Amplify Science curriculum. So we are working on doing that integration. The complexity is there in doing it in a way that makes sense, and there are still not enough minutes in the day.
Exactly. And my point was that the more you can integrate it, not the fact that you will integrate it by X date, but even, to be quite frank, to the math curriculum. There are some people that math is a natural, and they can do the calculations in their heads. And there's me, or people like me, who you need to be able to put that math knowledge or lesson into an applicable setting. So the more you could put it into an environmental setting, the person could actually visualize it, in my mind. But again, that makes it more complicated. There's not enough minutes in the day.
That's plenty. Sorry.
That's okay. I just know we have sort of a time check that we need to do. And so I just want to know we have a lot of information to walk through. And curriculum is one of those. Chris has his hand up, so I want to make sure we do give Chris an opportunity, though. Are you there?
Where I wanted to weigh in is very much on the standard of, thank you, Dr. Rose. The sustainability curriculum is something that I'm actually kind of proud of for our district. I've seen it grow over the years, and it is something that I feel pretty good about. And it's also something where I did not see very much in our public comment asking for changes or better integration or anything regarding the sustainability curriculum. What I'm hearing is operational sustainability concerns. That is, the concerns with, do we have composting for food, is not something about, oh, we need a curriculum around composting. It's, we need to compost. And so I suspect that that's going to be the stuff you're talking about next. And I don't really feel much need to dive deeply into the curricular offerings.
Excellent. Thank you. So I think with that, we're going to go ahead and continue moving forward.
But if you don't explain to the students why, the why is important, then the what never gets done.
Go ahead.
Sorry, one really quick question, general question. You were throwing out some dates around the science curriculum of when this particular one was implemented. I think you said it was 2015, correct? 2013,
Middle
2015?
school was 2015, high school was 2016, elementary is 2019.
Okay. Oh, okay. So my question was going to be kind of what is the cadence for updating science curriculum? Because specifically for environmental science, a lot has come to light in the last 5 years.
Right.
And so I'm just kind of curious how that works in terms of updating with the latest scientific information.
So one of the shifts that we've made in the past 5 years was moving from we've adopted a curriculum and we'll revisit it in a chunk of time, 8 to 10 years, and then we'll refresh it, to having it be we've adopted a curriculum or we have a curriculum. How are we continually looking at it to update the scope and sequence, add supplemental resources like OpenSciEd? So that's a fairly continual process. We do have a calendar that goes about 10 years out of when technically the curriculum's up for adoption, but the curriculum adoption process, and I'll actually call it instructional resources process, is really fluid, and it has to be because, exactly to your point, things change so quickly that if we wait and go, it's 2030 before we look at this again, that's not appropriate for learning for our students. And the one piece I would add to that, and I'm actually going to cheat and go back to your comment about math, most of the new standards are focused on critical thinking, or they're focused on skills that are larger than I can do calculations in math. They're identifying patterns. They're looking at students being able to critically examine things, make persuasive arguments. Most of the standards in every content area follow that pattern of how are we developing better thinkers. And so within that, we can say that to kind of the point of a sustainability curriculum, OSPI's actual sustainability standards are incredibly outdated. They're from 2014. They refer to the ELERs. So they don't have Common Core in them. They're not helpful at this moment. We've emailed them to see when they're going to be updated. But in our thinking as a system, the more that we're focused on supporting students to be really empowered, independent thinkers who can process information, then we help with sustainability, we help with science, we help with math. So all of our curriculum, instructional resource choices, decisions are based around that kind of thinking.
Thank you. All right.
So one of the other things just to call out, and this is again still thinking about curriculum, is that there is work going on in our district to think about climate justice as a bridge between science and social studies. And this is really happening more at the middle school and secondary school. We're just really getting started about that, to think about where, especially thinking about our focus as a district on equity, how we're having students again think about learning that's not esoteric, it's not removed from us, but that thinking about climate justice is something that's really important. Science and social studies are not separate esoteric pieces. So, and it falls in line with thinking about, with the standards and thinking about the WACs and guidance from the state in thinking about climate justice. And again, it's reinforced through the social studies standards, which are new in 2020, and then NGSS as well. So our goal is that we're continuing to extend, to supply resources for K-12 that will support that civic engagement and community action and place-based learning. And that really is one of the goals is continued deep engagement with community partners around this. And I'll specifically call out, and I can't speak, actually I can speak. So one of our great partners for years has been sustainability ambassadors. They have incredible passion, and they also recognize that a really important piece is engaging teachers in the professional learning and having students be able to just feet on the ground, be able to make change. So that's been a really great project. We're continuing to provide resources to the curriculum cloud, which is where we house all of our resources for teachers. Any teacher has access to the K-12 anything that they want. So it's something that we want to continue to build, that K-12 vision, and have every teacher, every educator have access to understanding what happens at kindergarten, what happens in AP Environmental Science, and recognize that building that integrated pathway and that knowledge is really important for us.
Any questions about the climate justice? I'd just like to say that's fabulous. I'm glad to hear that's being integrated and that piece. And So appreciate the way that actually, as you're discussing through the whole curriculum, how these things are starting to tie together throughout pieces, because that's sort of how it fits.
The integration part, again, kudos, because again, to get the student or the teacher to throw the right thing into the right barrel, it's not just a peer pressure or I'm going to yell at you for it. It's the idea, why is this important to me as a person and my own life and perhaps my children's life, if they can think that far ahead. It makes it real. If you don't make it real, it's just another lesson, and you're not going to put it into practice then, because we're talking about practices, and we're talking about administrative follow-through, if you will. So it has to be explained to why it's important, and I appreciate the fact you're integrating that so it does become real for them.
I think we're good.
You're good with the time immemorial curriculum?
Yes, this is something. This is the integration piece where
Right.
we're integrating. So our goal with the social studies adoption, we've had, I think, to some what you're saying, Director Stewart, this has been a lot of the work from the climate justice and this work here in thinking about since time immemorial and how that is showing up. These have been teachers and students and specialists. This has not been a directive of anyone saying somebody better get this together. This has been people saying here's an opportunity that we can come together and here's a way that we can integrate these pieces. So it's really been a passion project of people coming together. So I want to just recognize the teachers and the specialists that have been at the forefront of this. And I want to say it's really complex. We're like just at elementary school, we're talking about 750 teachers. And we are also in an environment where as we look at our academic achievement and our results for academics, we have many things that need attention in terms of thinking about our inclusion efforts and our literacy and our math and all those pieces. So part of this is thinking about how do we, to what many of the directors have said today, how do we integrate this so that it's possible to do and supports effort. So, but this, since time immemorial, as we go forward with the social studies adoption, when we make a decision about resources, absolutely part of our resources and our scope and sequence will include the since time immemorial curriculum and will include the integrated learning for sustainability, science, and social studies.
Okay, the next section of the presentation, and Dr. Rose, I'll let you walk through these next portions since you pulled them together. As you know, our Director of College and Career Readiness, Donita Arimas, was the one that probably held the majority of this information. And so Jen actually went to staff and put this together. And so we may not be the experts in the field, but we'll provide you with the information and in those pieces. And so a number of years ago, we put some effort in place to provide our elementary schools with the resources to be able to, on an opt-in basis, have a staff member be stipended for green team efforts to achieve King County green team school status, green school status. There's various levels and there's requirements at each level to be able to attain that and maintain those levels of recognition. And so we put that into place, I believe, under Dr. Pierce in her tenure. And to be honest with you, I haven't seen these data in a number of years collected in this manner. I can tell you these data are much different than they were before we did that implementation. At the secondary level, it's much more, to Shivani's point, I don't know if it's student-driven, but on some level it is, because it's a lot of the sustainability efforts are orchestrated or focused through the clubs at our secondary schools. And that's in partnership with a staff member, so it isn't that it's in isolation, but many of the efforts are students, spending time, taking action, developing plans. And so if you go back to that first slide, at the very bottom of the slide, you can see currently we have 33 level 1 green schools, 14 level 2, 4 level 3. And I apologize, I can't talk about sustaining green schools. That wasn't a status that I recall. And so, but we have, well, we've debated as to how many schools we have in the district. So there's a few different ways you can count it. But, we have about 57 schools in the district. And so this represents, I believe, if my calculation was correct, about 52 of our schools. And so many of our schools are participating in the King County Green Schools Initiative, which, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we maybe had, 5 to 10 schools participating. And so that just kind of demonstrates, without a concerted effort, I would say, without a comprehensive plan, that there is interest across our school system or across our district to be considerate and thoughtful around issues of sustainability, which to me is actually promising that we could do some things on a very comprehensive level that is consistent across our schools, because our schools are already demonstrating the interest that this is a value that they have, and so doing that work and is important to them. So I said you could present, so I'll let you kind of talk through the different anecdotes that you found as well.
And Dale might have more information as well, because I think level directors gathered a lot of this information. This is an incomplete list, and I'll say I'm excited that this is a very incomplete list of the specific projects that are happening. I was out at Sandburg not long ago, and they have a wonderful food sharing program that is just really choreographed. So we know our schools are doing a tremendous number of things, and we've only partially captured them here. What level 1 means is that 33 of our schools are doing a really good job, more than most of the nation, in sustainability, and that we've got 14 schools that are doing an even better job, and go all the way up to thinking about that. I also want to recognize that I think it was in 2019 that Sandburg was recognized at the national level for being a green school, and I think we actually toured Sandburg right around that time, and then we also had recognition as a district at that time for the work that we're doing on a comparative national level. So these, again, this is a very incomplete list of all of the things that our schools are doing. The other piece at elementary, they also have environmental clubs, and that's not captured here as well. Those are things that are not part of the official here's what's happening, but there's so much passion, as you saw in the letters to the board, around that.
Jenna, I just want to add one piece. In one of our school visits to Ella Baker Elementary, we had the opportunity to see, it was either a third or a fourth grade, it was fourth grade, and it actually was all fourth graders at Ella Baker participating in and correct me if my enunciation is incorrect, hydroponics effort. And so, and again, it's back to Mark's, comments around integrated. So they had hydroponic setups. Highly impressive, actually.
That works for me.
So they had, I think, 3 or 4 actual setups. I wish I had a better word. I'm sure the hydroponic community is watching right now and they're rolling their eyes, but that's okay. So they were doing that effort. They were studying about, why would you do hydroponics? Like how is this impactful to a community? When is this, which communities would benefit most from this as an effort? So they did that whole kind of study, and that's really science, social studies. They're writing about it. And then kind of the final phase that they were doing was they had to take their learning around hydroponics and think about a community-based project around what they had learned. And so, we got to talk to some very passionate young people about their projects, but they were thinking about how do I impact my community based on this learning around issues related to sustainability, food, equity. I mean, it was really comprehensive in nature. Again, those staff members in that school, they have really identified some really kind of core areas that they want to focus on, and they also focus on doing it in a universal manner. So it wasn't just that one fourth grade class was participating in it. And so then you think about it, every Ella Baker student that rolls through that fourth grade curriculum, then every Ella Baker student leaves that school with that experience, as opposed to just some students leave Ella Baker with that. So, Dale.
The thing I'd add is you hit on it. Sorry, I don't have a microphone, I'll speak
Here, let's.
more loudly. Is what was impressive, and what is impressive in that program is really it's the students talking about what they're learning. It wasn't teachers telling us the program and what their kids are learning today and what they'll learn next. The students would come and grab you and want to tell you about what they were doing, why they were doing it, how it all interrelates. And that was the part that really resonated with me, is that, yes, they're doing this program, but the students are really empowered in their learning to draw connections and make an impact in their community.
It's so important to have ownership. And once you have ownership, then you have buy-in, and you have practice then evolves from it.
Dr. Rose, do you have any other comments around these?
These ones, I would just say again, this is an incomplete list. Like you heard about the project at Rose Hill Middle School. These are, so that's on there. So there's more projects like that. There are, I would say that a goal that we would always have is how do we have more of that integration? How are those projects really moving from being in the classroom to being something that has relevance? There are lots of clubs that do that for students. And so again, we have teacher advisors who support our students to have engagement outside of school and with other students, which is so energizing, inspiring to see like you're part of this bigger movement, part of this bigger community. So it's really exciting to see that. Same thing at high school. The clubs are really powerful and engaged and are even more frequently connected to the classroom. So like I'm thinking about that classroom that we saw at Lake Washington High School where the students were engaged in, let me come back a moment. The students were engaged in learning, but by being part of a CTE program, I know because I'm signing all their forms right now to go visit with other schools and go to conferences, be engaged in learning that is really powerful and connects them to here's what you can do right now to make a difference in your world, and here's how you're empowered to think about your career paths going forward. And I think we were talking about the hydroponic thing. We saw one of the cool things that we saw in Lake Washington High School was the students and the teacher. We saw the same design that we saw at Ella Baker, and we saw the students creating 3 to 4 other ones using different materials. So they were really learning flexibility of thinking and how to interact. So I just wanted to recognize that through the clubs and then through things like our CTE program, our students have access to being connected across large areas, being connected to different groups and being empowered in their communities.
And, as we think about developing a more comprehensive approach to sustainability, it's also then being clear around what is the role of a staff member in a school and the adults, and what is the role we want our students to play. Because I would argue that, use the word empower, the more we empower our students to be able to lead some of this work in a comprehensive way, the better they're going to leave our system prepared to be really the type of community members that then really think about, support, create sustainability efforts. So it's this delicate balance of, yes, we want our adults leading it, but we also want our students with that opportunity to be creative, think about their world, what they want to do. And this is a very truncated version of what Dale provided to me for middle school and high school. I cut it way down, and you can kind of go through these line by line if you want. Right, I know. But ultimately, what this tells you is, and we just didn't hear from Kamiakin, so it's not that they're doing nothing. We just didn't hear back from them. So all of our schools have some level of effort to the point that's been made a few different times. There's very little consistency in what that looks like or the experience that occurs from school to school.
And I would assume a lot of us is knowing the district PTSA, and our PTSA is highly active in a lot of that work and making sure that that is
Absolutely.
occurring in these after-school
Great
clubs.
partners.
Just want to make sure we get the call out to that, because there's a lot of good work at the
Absolutely.
level of our PTSAs in supporting this.
And a hydroponic setup is also called a farm stand from time to time.
Well, as the schools look at such as hydroponics, we need to be able to show them that there is a real-world application to it. This is not just a project in science class. This can be actually done in the real world to feed this X number of people and save this much land, or take advantage of not having that kind of land to use. Once they see that it's actually real, it makes it so much better, because God knows we all sprouted seeds in science class in the third grade or second grade, but we didn't learn about how that's important to feed a nation or a world. Soil erosion became very real to me when the fact that my grandmother still served dinner with the plates down, face down, because she remembered 30 years before that, if you didn't, your plate was filled with dust. And she still did it to her dying day.
So I would just like to say, from what I've seen of the hydroponics and the farm stands, they are highly integrated, and they are thinking about those applications within the classrooms that we saw.
Great.
So excellent work in how that's going, which to bring that in and make it, it's a tool to talk about other things as well. So it's awesome.
And Jen, I know we deleted a slide at the end around the curriculum standards. Do you just want to speak to, I think they were 2014 standards that referenced the ELERs. Do you have a recollection of what they referenced? And if you don't, this isn't a pop quiz,
They technically, they called in ELA standards, I don't think they actually even called in social studies standards and science standards, and they were so old that they took me way back. That isn't to say that OSPI isn't doing work around sustainability, but there's not a framework that's helpful to us right now. The resources that we've gotten from OSPI and Puget Sound ESD have been through, they do have some wonderful science folks that are really working on supporting our teachers with professional learning. And what's been helpful is the Open SciEd has been deeply supported by Puget Sound ESD and OSPI. And that's really the help that we're looking for, or that's help that's helpful to us, is what can we use and how do we integrate that? And being able to use an open educational resource has been exciting because it's dynamic and it's collaborative. And there are issues with an open educational resource as well. Links are broken sometimes. But to have it be something, especially with this curriculum, that we recognize it's a statewide project, and that our teachers, just like our students that are in CTE in AP Environmental or Urban Agriculture, our teachers are doing the same thing, where they're meeting with teachers from across the state saying this is important and here's how we use it to best impact. So the standards themselves and the framework themselves, the framework just calls in standards from other places. They do have three, they call them, the standards that are specifically called sustainability standards are three essential short paragraphs. Not especially helpful to us as well from 2014, but there is wonderful work going on across the state to think about these complex issues of, in a small system or a large system with so many things to do, how do you prioritize and value things that really make a difference, and not say we're too busy to do something when, that may be true, but we still have to think about how do we integrate this learning for students so they are empowered and thoughtful and can make decisions in their own lives that impact themselves and the world that we live in.
Okay, thank you so much for putting that together and in a comprehensive manner. We appreciate that. That was helpful. And so we're going to go ahead and take a break. Lauren, one of our guest speakers, who she had the choice of swimming from Vashon this morning or coming in remotely because the ferries decided to not run this morning. So she's going to be joining us remotely. She's on our team's meeting already, and so we'll go ahead and take a break. Why don't we get started? And we're actually going at 9:45, and then we won't do our second break probably, so that the board has time to discuss as well. But we'll take 15 minutes, and we will start right at 9:45.
People. All right, so we will be starting.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started.
And there we are. All staring at the camera. I'm going to welcome people back.
Sure.
All right, so we will now continue with our next session continue on sustainability. And this time, I think, Dr. Holman, we have other guests here now.
We do, and as the board knows, we were in the process of packaging information to bring to the board, and Barbara and I had the pleasure of meeting Melissa and Lauren. Both work for McKinstry and have had deep connections with Lake Washington School District around resource conservation management and sustainability for, if I remember correctly, 10 and 12 years. And as they were presenting, I messaged Barbara on Teams. I said, is there any way they could present this information? Because to hear their voice and their expertise and their connection, not only to the district, but really, the region and really the trends around sustainability and just taking a thoughtful approach to it. They also understand the journey our district has been on, and they have really put together a collection of information to provide us really from that operational side what Lake Washington School District has been involved with for many years as we think about how do we create a process and a structure to be systematic about our efforts. I think there's some of our efforts that are systematic already, and I think we're going to hear some of those today. And so Executive Director of Support Services Brian Buck is here. He's maintained a connection with McKinstry over the years. And so, Brian, I don't know if you want to start with any opening comments around this, and then we'll hand it off to Melissa and Lauren.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd say my predecessor, Forrest Miller, began a resource conservation management program in 2005. I believe one of the early adopters of resource conservation management for school districts in Washington, and we've had a very strong relationship with McKinstry and a strong resource conservation management program for quite some time. It's my pleasure to have Melissa and Lauren here. I've been working with them since I arrived in 2013. They do everything from looking at all of our utility bills to ensure that they're accurate, to helping us design standards for capital construction, and also with all of our facilities and operations services. So I'll kind of hand it over to Melissa and Lauren.
Sure. Thank you.
And what's the best way for the board to indicate? A lot of times they'll put their, like this, to
sure.
ask a question.
Yep.
And so if they do that, we'll just help flag that for you and Lauren.
Make sure
Yeah.
Chris does that too at home.
That sounds great. For-
I'm broadcasting right now, Teams is up. I'm just showing it differently than you do it. So both Lauren and Chris can see it.
Yep. And I can see Lauren on my screen, so if you guys have a question while she's talking, I can wave at her or something. So
Confirmed. I can see you.
All right. So, out further, Lauren, do you want to just? I'll introduce kind of the second half. Lauren, do you want to introduce yourself now and then kind of start with the first few slides, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Hi, everyone. I apologize for not being in person. I was really excited to be there and had my coffee and was in the very line, and it just did not go. So thank you for having us today. As Melissa and Brian mentioned, I've been connected to the Lake Washington School District for about a decade now, focused on supporting the resource conservation management program out there. From a broader sense, I'm currently the operations director as part of our team here at McKinstry, working with many of the public school districts in the greater Seattle area and with our partners across the country to understand what's happening in K-12 as it relates to operational optimization, sustainability, and it's really exciting to see things happening at the local level to move this conversation forward. So I'm very excited to share what Lake Washington has been doing and where we see potential future growth for you guys. Melissa, do you want me to just kick this off?
Yeah, hand. I think now it's not working. Oh, there we go.
All right. Sounds good. Well, since I did have the luxury of joining remotely towards the last couple of minutes of your previous session, it was really great to hear some of the language you all are already using about the district approach to sustainability and giving accolades to all the things that are happening kind of on an individual level at each school. And what I heard between the lines was this call to say, hey, we're doing a lot of great things. What we need to do is make sure that everybody understands what we're doing and that we move it towards maybe a more unified, comprehensive, and smart approach so that everybody is on board and that we're getting a consistent approach across the district. I think this is a really great opportunity to talk about what comprehensive sustainability planning is. The next slide I'm going to go to in a moment is about carbon planning. Both of these are really kind of buzzwords when stakeholders, when voters are asking for things, when students are asking for things. And I wanted to level set today with some definitions so that we have clarity on what you would be interested in, what you're asking for, and then hopefully you can ask some smart questions of people when they come to you and are saying, why aren't we doing X, Y, and Z, or we need to do X, Y, and Z. You can have a smart conversation about what that means. So real quick, backing up to what is sustainability? Sustainability is a very holistic, broad concept that really talks about meeting the needs of the present without compromising the needs of future generations. When we talk about sustainability, we're not just talking about composting and recycling, but it does touch on things that the district is already thinking about, like sustainability educational standards. That doesn't have a direct tie to something like carbon, but it is comprehensive in how the district may approach sustainability. And so these are some of the key areas that a comprehensive sustainability plan would address, things like community, student success, transportation, facilities, financial sustainability, grounds. So I just wanted to level set that because we'll talk about it later in the presentation. Conversely, on the next slide, Melissa.
Wrong way. Got it. Got it now.
Oh, thanks. The other buzzword when we talk about planning is often around carbon. This can be called emissions reduction, carbon footprint, net zero. There's lots of ways that people talk about it. And a carbon emissions reduction plan is an integral part of a holistic sustainability plan. Generally, when we talk about greenhouse gas emissions, we're talking about climate impact of our operations, and it's emissions from facility energy use, transportation, waste, and purchase materials. And there's an activity called a carbon footprint that you can understand what is the footprint of the district, and setting goals and actions to reduce that footprint is specifically a carbon or emissions reduction plan. And again, that's one piece of a holistic sustainability plan, but it is often a spot where stakeholders and others focus initially because it is the most direct and quantifiable path to saying, how are we impacting the planet and how can we reduce our footprint? But I do want to say that it is a part of a holistic sustainability plan.
It's often become the buzzword.
All right, let's go to the next slide. Are there any questions on that first before we move on?
Nope, you're good.
All right. Awesome. So I'd love to take a couple minutes and further recognize everything that Lake Washington School District is doing. This was really fun to present last week to a couple stakeholders to talk about all the things that are happening, because often they're siloed, not celebrated publicly, and this is a really great opportunity to pull them all together into one place. So Lake Washington School District is already a nationally recognized sustainability leader in the K-12 space. You all have received numerous awards from the U.S. Department of Education, King County Green Schools, Puget Sound Energy, and received a multitude of certifications for the efforts already underway. And that's what I want to walk through today. Next slide, please. So first off, Brian mentioned the start of all of these initiatives was really in about 2005 with the instigation of a resource conservation management program. We're very blessed here in the Pacific Northwest that Puget Sound Energy, our local utility, has an incentive program to help start up and incentivize resource conservation management. This is really about utilities conservation, both from an emissions standpoint, but also cost savings to the district. Over the course of this program, Lake Washington has significantly reduced their utilities consumption, 30% reduction in energy per square foot since 2006, 37% reduction in natural gas usage over that same time period, and 30% of water reduction since 2008. This has a direct impact on the planet and a direct line on the utilities budget for the district.
Yep. And keep in mind, this is a reduction while adding new buildings, square footage, things like that, right? So it's a reduction while you're adding, which is pretty significant.
Yep.
I did it again. There we go.
So that was a percentage metric, but this also results in real dollars saved for the district. $18.4 million in cost savings since 2006 across the district. So this is utilities that would have been spent based on increased community use, increased square footage, increased operational requirements due to COVID, things like that. $18.4 million is a huge success story. In addition to those utility bill savings, Puget Sound Energy sends an annual grant in the form of a check rebate to the district directly, and typically it's between $25,000 and $30,000, more as a thank you that says you've hit some thresholds and targets for helping us reduce our utility load, and that goes directly back into the utilities budget for the district. Next slide. Thanks. So this is a very complicated slide at first glance, but the real story behind this is as the district has grown since the initial start of this program, growth is shown by those orange bars in the background. Square footage has continued to increase. We've added students, we've added hours of use to our buildings. The business as usual costs, had you not had an RCM program, is that green line. So utility spend increases as square footage increases, and we have actually been able to help through low and no cost optimization efforts maintain your utility budget at that yellow line level. So it has stayed relatively stable. You'll notice the big drop that happened in 2019, 2020, COVID, shut down buildings, and many of the districts actually did not experience this same shape graph that Lake Washington did. with increased ventilation requirements and just kind of the chaos that was happening in buildings, their utility spend actually skyrocketed and often inverted the savings that they had experienced in the past. And we were able to help, through a really great partnership with your operators and proactive approach to this, continue to maintain those savings and reduce the impact as much as possible, even with these changes in how we had to operate the facilities.
Lauren, can I just jump in and make a comment real
Yes.
quick? Can you go back
Please,
to that?
John.
Can you go back to that previous slide? When Lauren and Melissa were presenting this, we actually didn't. We weren't going to spend a ton of time on that reduction in savings. And my initial thought was, it's disappointing that our savings was reduced. But I think it's an important point to note that what Lauren said was most districts are inverted based on COVID. And so they actually, that green line and that yellow line, they flipped. And so through efforts, partnership, collaboration, we're able to actually maintain a cost savings even in the environment where we were, needing to use more energy. We weren't being as conservative in our approach for, you think about the airflow. Like we were exchanging air within our spaces. I think it was 7 times an hour. So those were types, significantly increases energy costs. And so I didn't pick up on it at first when they said it, and then we asked some questions about it. And so I just think like that is a huge celebration, a very recent celebration.
I think a lot of this comes down to the point of communications about what we've done. All of you odds, none of us in the room, well, a couple of staff people may have known, but the rest of us had no clue. And that makes the parents, the students have even less of a clue, the community less of a clue. So the more we communicate this out, especially the part about the COVID, the fact that we were able to do it by comparison to other districts and what we've done comparison to other districts, we need to make that known to the PTSAs, to the community groups, so forth, so everyone realizes what we have done. Granted, we got miles to go, but if they don't know where we are, they don't know where we need to go.
Yep. And to that point, you guys are actually operating at 100% outside air, which is even more than other districts. So you are bringing in more fresh air and saving more than a lot of districts in the area. So there's another part of that as well, is you were even bringing in more fresh air. So, yeah. All right. Lauren, you want to?
All right. So these next 6 or 7 slides are going to go through other aspects of district operations where there has been a significant focus on sustainability strategies, both having cost impacts, but also more holistic either engagement or other types of savings that are showing that the district is being proactive and moving the district in a sustainable direction. So first off is water reduction. This is actually part of the Resource Conservation Management Program, but touches a large variety of aspects of the district. So first off, there's been a 95% reduction, or 95% of our toilets have been replaced with modern 1.6 gallons per flush. This significantly reduces the amount of water that we're just flushing down and paying sewer charges on, and reduces the amount of water that is being brought into the district. 75% of water consumption was reduced by retrofitting restroom sinks with aerators.
Oh, Lauren, hang on one sec.
Real quick question.
Yeah.
1.6 we're at.
Yeah.
Where were we?
Yeah, what were those? They're 3.4?
Yeah, traditionally, they're more like 2.5 gallons. There are a couple different models, but 2.5 was the previous standard before 1.6.
Right, thank you. That puts it in perspective.
And there are some really old ones go up to like 3.4. That's a lot, but yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah. So aerators, if you're not familiar with them, these are the little pieces that screw on the end that make the water extra bubbly when it comes out, increasing the ability for people to wash their hands with less water. So that has reduced water consumption 75% from the sinks in our restrooms. $500,000 annual savings in irrigation cost by switching to native landscaping. So again, we're talking about water reduction, but this is really something that our grounds crews are associated with, as well as capital planning on what types of plants we choose to put in, how we install them, and how we maintain them over their lifetime. This is an 80% reduction in irrigation water usage just by selecting plants that don't need to be watered as regularly. And $175,000 in annual sewer cost savings. This is through a variety of ways. One, those older toilets being replaced reduces the amount of water that we're flushing down. But also, Melissa mentioned earlier that proactive looking at utility bills to make sure that our sewer costs are accurately being captured. This is a miss that many school districts and many organizations have, where they just pay the bill as they come in. And sewer costs are a very complicated part of a utility bill, where they are subtracting out the water that's used at a district from what's coming in, and they charge you per gallon for that. And so through proactive management of actual gallons and looking at your utility bills, we're saving about $175,000 just since 2019. Two improvements to buildings that we wanted to call out. One is dishwashers. The second is rain barrels. Large kitchen dishwashers are helping save water and energy, and they're being replaced with new equipment that uses steam to preheat incoming water. This reduces overall water and increases the energy efficiency of dishwashers. And then rain barrels help minimize irrigation costs. It is also a really great way to bring students and the community into the efforts that are being had on site to reduce stormwater runoff and really publicly and visibly celebrate the commitments that the district has to cutting down on water usage in their schools.
Yeah, so you just heard the example from Lauren talking through just by sustainable planning before doing retrofits or new projects, we're able to lower irrigation. So in that theme, I think the district has really done a good job with proactive planning around retrofitting certain buildings, modernizing systems, and also replacing full buildings. Do you have a question?
Quick question. Talked about moving from just hot water to steam in the dishwashers.
Yeah.
Is there a trade-off of energy expended to make the steam as opposed to the water that goes into the, you see where I'm going?
Yep. Lauren,
Is there a trade-off there?
Did you hear that question, Lauren?
I did. So overall, they are more energy efficient. To heat up steam, it actually takes less to heat up that same quantity of steam as it does to heat up the water. And just upgrading these systems, similar to how you would buy a TV with an Energy Star sticker on it today, newer systems are specifically designed to be more energy efficient. And so, yes, we're saving on the energy side and on the water side in those dishwashing units.
I'm glad to hear that we're not having a trade-off for one for the other, and it's kind of zeroing out.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Everything, all these things that we're talking through, that is something the district always has in mind. That's something we're always talking about, not just sustainability because it's a buzzword, but what is the actual trade-off? And that's how we do calculations through looking at bills. We actually do have our engineering team do calculations. When we're talking about a dishwasher, it's usually done by the factory. Things like this, when you start talking about a retrofit of a whole HVAC system, we're actually doing a calculation to understand, okay, maybe there's 3 options of systems. What is the best for that building? And sometimes it's different, right? You hear a lot about geothermal, how efficient it is. Sometimes it can't be retrofitted into an older building. So what is the course you could take? What's the best course for that building? So that is a constant trade-off, like pro-con calculation that we're doing through thought and then also through actual mathematical calculations. So yeah. So talking about energy retrofits, as the district goes through and thinks about modernizing a building, it's exactly that discussion, right? What is the best for that building? How can we address that building the best way possible? Building controls, how is the building operating? Are we looking at any new renewable energy? Lake Washington is actually has the largest amount of solar array output of a district in the state. So you're actually leading in solar arrays. Using things like CO2 sensors, so understanding, instead of just saying we're going to bring in lots of air all the time, how much does that room actually need? Like how many people are in it? How much CO2 is actually building up? Going to more efficient lighting, and then boiler replacements like HVAC. We kind of talked about that through geothermal and other systems. What's the most efficient thing for that building? Buildings are made out of different materials, from the cinder block of years ago to new modern materials. That all goes into a calculation of what's the best for that building. how it's operated. Yes. It's a bit of a black box, so where do we want to start? I used to work for building controls. So building controls, we call them DDC, direct digital controls. It's a computer that goes to, we call it a global controller that sits on any building. So every single building has a global controller, and then it has little controllers that sit out on all the equipment, lighting, things like that, the HVAC equipment, and it talks to it. And we program it and look at it and understand if it's heating correctly, if it's cooling correctly, if it's running all night. It gives us feedback on how the equipment's operating. We work with Brian and his team on what they're seeing in the field. We do site visits and check that they're operating correctly. Your thermostats are actually tied back to it. So by outside air, you name it, by CO2, it goes back to the computer and that global controller and tells the building how it should be operating. So that is a huge piece of sustainability. It's a little bit of an unknown thing, even when you start to get into the building world. The engineers and things kind of, they're like, oh, that's the black box thing. So we have a specific team of engineers that focuses on that. They can road into the controls. They can look at what your buildings are doing at any given time, make sure the air coming in is correct and that it's operating correctly. Anything else around that? Yeah.
We had the smoke problem from the fires this last year. Yep. Do you have any information that could show how we were able to use what you had in place to filter out that smoke? Because that was a big concern of a lot of parents not wanting to send their kids to school. And to be quite frank, it might have been safer in school with our filtration system than our home system.
You hit the nail on the head. I had a bunch of parents while I was staying out soccer with my kids, when are they going to cancel school? And I was like, well, actually, any commercial building system is better than anything you have at home. It should be. Maybe you have some extreme system, but 99% of the time it's better in school, right? You have what we call MERV 13 filters, which I think after COVID, everybody knows what that is besides just us in the industry. So stronger filters, equipment that operates with building controls, like an actual smart brain that's telling it what to do. So working with Brian, we figured out, depending on what the air quality ratings were, we were balancing how much air is coming in because we want it to be fresh for COVID, and then how much is coming in with smoke, and it was a constant balance remoting into that control system and constantly moving dampers, moving the system to make sure that it was bringing in the right amount for kids and keeping kids safe.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would just add that the building controls also allow us to have a sequence of operations when buildings warm up so that we're economizing how those buildings get to temperature. They're also on building schedules so that, lights and heat aren't stuck on, that they're all scheduled per our building control system. We also have 24/7, we can remote in to those building controls to adjust them if we, find some anomalies outside of business hours.
These are really invisible efforts, to be quite frank, that no one will ever see.
Yes.
Correct.
And so all the more reason to, when we're talking about sustainability, we have to communicate, here's what we've done that you don't see or you can't see.
Yep, it's behind the, especially when we talk about building HVAC systems and building controls, that's a huge amount of district energy use. I mean, that's a massive amount of use. And it's the thing behind the walls that people don't see when it gets modernized or replaced. You don't see, all people know is if they're hot or cold. They don't see that it's providing fresh air to the rooms, and I think with COVID, that's been a lot more people understand it at a different level, but it's still not the pretty, new vestibule that they're going to see when they walk in, right? It's behind the wall, and it contributes to the safety of kids, air, and energy. So.
Lauren may have had a comment as well.
Oh, sure. Sorry, Lauren.
Lauren, did you have something you were going to say as well?
Yeah, just one quick piece. So things like a resource conservation management program, what we're tactically doing is going in and making sure buildings are continuing to operate in the most efficient way possible on an ongoing basis. So it's looking at things like schedules, temperatures, damper positions on an ongoing basis. And those updated building controls allow us to do that more efficiently. So it not only makes your building more efficient, but it allows engineers and your district staff to interact with that building oftentimes remotely, so they don't have to drive on site to like, go sit in the boiler room and tweak the system, but it allows for that constant tune-up to make sure that things are operating optimally over time. And so upgrading those systems to the most efficient and newest technology is really helpful in maintaining systems, particularly as we're faced with more acute and quick turn changes with COVID or smoke, where things need to be very responsive. That's where building controls can really help.
Yeah, and there's lots of districts out there that have really old, obsolete controls that you can't remote into anymore, and someone has to drive there, mess with it on site. Some have what we call pneumatics, which is before there was DDC, there was air tubes that would like move dampers and things. So luckily, Lake Washington's been in a really good spot and made some good investments on new building controls because that really just operates everything for kids.
On a base communication standpoint, this presentation, this information ought to be on our website. Now, that's very passive. Is it?
That we just wait on the communication piece so we can continue with the sustainability. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions on this? Okay.
What really quick question? Can you contextualize largest solar capacity of any school district in the state for us?
Yeah, Lauren, do you have the actual number? We have.
I don't think I have it off the top of my head.
Jed would.
I would say solar in general has been a little bit slower to come to the state of Washington, like compared to Arizona. We're still at a very small scale than a typical school district in a very sunny state that has higher electricity costs. One of the challenges we have in the Pacific Northwest is we have very low cost and very clean energy compared to many parts of the country. Most of our power comes from hydropower, and we have some of the lowest electricity rates in the United States. And so the tables are turning, and renewable energy like solar is becoming more cost effective in the state of Washington. So it's not a huge array. Most of the solar in Lake Washington is more demonstration projects. Again, outreach, visibility about a commitment to move in that direction. I want to say it's somewhere in the like 25 megawatt phase, but I can look up an actual number and put it in the slide deck to send out.
Yeah, other parts of the country, they're still using like coal to fire their power plants, right? And that's not what we do here. And then like on the East Coast and South, power is very, very expensive. It's not as expensive here. So when you start doing that mathematical equation of what's the payback, it's higher here in Washington, not just because of the sun. Everyone thinks it's just because of the sun. We actually do get some solar output through the clouds. So it's not just that. It's also, like she was saying, how clean our energy is and the low cost. That's why it's been slower here. So we also talk about it through building new schools, right? So that was modernizing schools that are existing. When you talk about building new schools, I think the district has done a really fantastic job of putting together standards on how you want that to be. This is a little bit like the planning we're talking about. They've done that for new construction. How are we going to plan sustainability into new buildings? All the buildings are 20% better than Energy Code, which is a really big deal because Washington Energy Code is like one of the most strict in the country. In the last few years, they've reduced it more and more. So to be 20% below that is a really big accomplishment. Utilizing geothermal where possible. We talked about where possible because some sites you can't, some buildings where they're situated you just can't, or it might not be the best for that building, but where possible, using new technology. Solar panel ready, that is something that the district was doing before it was code. It's actually now code. Before it was even code, if you build a new building, even if you're not going to put a solar panel on it, you had to make it solar ready, meaning the structural had to be there. That's a big impact to solar today, is going back. You can't just put a solar panel out. Most schools you would have to do structural reinforcements. So you have to pull the roof off, put a structural reinforcement, re-roof, and then solar. So that's a huge barrier to getting solar out everywhere. So before that was even code, the district was working on putting wiring conduit up there, making it structurally sound, putting a spot for solar, and now it is code. So, and then stormwater mitigation, we talked about the rain barrels. So, any questions about that? All right. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I just had a question about where the geothermal energy is being implemented, because I do know there's a lot of side effects to using geothermal energy. So I was wondering, like, do you have any specific examples with that?
Of like where it is good and not. So for example, there's a district right next to you that we're looking at retrofitting with geothermal, but it's not going to work because they're too close to a river, and it would negatively impact the temperature of the river even through the ground, even though it's a fair distance, just the calculation says it might, which can impact salmon, so therefore that's not a good fit for that school, right? And so there would be other environmental impacts if you did that, and that building is already at such a low energy use, it wouldn't give it a better energy use, and it could impact salmon. So that's an impact of kind of everything we take into account, not just the building, but the surrounding area, environmental factors. Is that helpful? Yeah, absolutely. Good question.
I would just add, as it relates to design for new construction, we recently developed strict owner project requirements for primarily the design of building controls, because if you don't specifically design certain elements, then you lose some of the functionality later. And what we saw in previous generations of construction is we'd go into the building controls and they didn't have all the data points needed to do what we wanted. So we now have a very strict OPR, is what we call it, for our building controls.
Yep. So owner project requirements. Yep. I knew what you're talking about. And because of that, when a lot of new schools you see, not the district has done such a good job of this, but I mean, I go to districts all the time, like, oh, you don't have to look at that. That's our brand new building, and it's the highest energy use because there's too much technology almost. Like it's running outside of what people can really take on, understand. So I don't know if you saw recently that newspaper article last week about how a school in Massachusetts had their lights on for an entire year. Their control system isn't working, right? So I think that was an older building. They don't know how, like the control system is old. They can't retrofit it. They don't know what to do with it. They'd have to replace the whole thing. So same thing for a new building. You put in something that's super high tech, but people don't exactly know how to use it or program it. It ends up running all night, just like an old one might. So Brian saying how much work he's done and the team's done on putting on together OPR, owner project requirements. It's really important because it tells the construction teams and architects when they go out, you can't just put anything in here. Like, this is what we want. This is what our teams know how to use. So our teams have been trained on, and this is what we can handle to make sure the building runs correctly. All right, Lauren, you want to talk about waste?
Oh, I see one more question just popped up.
Sorry, who's that? Oh, Chris.
Sorry about that. I actually was hoping that we could bop back to the resource conservation management, the RCM. 2 slides back.
Oh, sorry.
So on these energy efficiency retrofits, one of the things I'm curious about is how do we get kids in the loop? Can we let could we let children audit our choices? And the reason I'm asking that is very specifically in our public input that we started the meeting with, there were several people who were saying, oh, well, you could do blank to achieve savings X. And it's like to be able to say, hey, actually show what are our choices and could we actually save any money that way? Anyway, I'm actually interested. I'm probably doing a mark here. I'm getting into the
Communications is the word.
Communication part. Yeah.
Yeah, I can speak to that. If Lauren, do you want to? So I think there's a couple things there. Yes, absolutely. Like this picture up here is a little boy with blueprints, but that's not far off. Like there's so many ways to connect kids at a lot of different levels. Lauren, if you want to speak to green teams in a second, I can speak to kind of the overall, there's a lot of opportunity, whether it's the kids in that building that's getting the retrofit, whether it's CTE, having them understand what's happening, getting it into teachers' hands, green teams, which we work with. Lauren can speak to that. We've had kids come out and do tours at McKinstry where we start with like the engineering team and show how it goes through drafting and out to the shop and watch the guys actually pull those drawings in the shop and start bending sheet metal and creating what is going to be in their system. Then we've had union leads come out and talk about how to get into trades and how that works with engineering and how you have to know some engineering to get into trades. and just really meeting kids where they're at. Last week we had some kids from a secondary high school come out, and they spoke to a lot of the trades unions about how they get into being an apprentice. They understood kind of where those jobs fit in sustainability within construction and what's out there today. So I think that question spans a lot, everything from education of jobs that are coming in the future. That might be something you want to think about, how we're going to communicate that, all the way to what is happening in your building now and how can we see it in real time and use that. Lauren, do you want to speak to about the green teams a little bit?
Yeah, so one of the main ways that I'm getting a big echo also. I don't know if somebody unmuted.
I don't hear it, so I don't hear it. You sound good.
Okay.
My computer doesn't even have audio on. I told it to not use audio.
I think when Chris came on, it changed. Yeah, I think that is much better. Thanks. So talking about green teams real quick, one of the biggest ways that we engage with green teams is through data about the building. So helping them understand how their building is using energy. Sometimes we're doing building operator tours to give them a view of what's happening behind the scenes. So what's happening behind the walls, how their buildings function. It's really fun to see students see a huge boiler behind that locked door that says utilities and understand that that's where their heat comes from. We also have utility data available to share with them when they're doing applications for things like the King County Green Schools program, and it gives them real data sets that they can use in the classroom, not just for King County, but information that they can use in a math lesson, a science lesson, etc.
Question, anything else? Oh, there we go. There you go. Lauren, you want to talk about waste?
All right. Waste reduction. Oh, sorry. My echo is back. I don't know what changed.
That's okay. We don't hear it at all. So.
Okay, perfect. I will try to ignore it. So in the waste reduction stream, again, this is part of how we engage with schools across the district, from looking at bills, looking for opportunities to optimize, and then really partnering with custodials, teams, and students. Green teams have a huge impact on this. Focusing on waste has driven waste reduction costs since 2005 about 70% on a per student basis, about $227,000 per year less than what we were spending in 2005, which is huge. King County Green Schools and our local haulers have been a big help in driving these initiatives forward. King County also, drives this as an organizational level goal, and in Lake Washington School District has been an 8-time award winner for best place to work for waste prevention and recycling. I will say personally, as I look at the districts I work with, I am extremely impressed with the level of commitment and success that Lake Washington has had. If you look at those two bubbles over on the right, schools have recycling programs. Being in Western Washington, it sounds like that should be a no-brainer, that 100% of schools are participating. It is not the case. So kudos to Lake Washington. And 80% of schools currently have compost collection programs. Just to be clear, this is not a compost pile out in the playground or out in the parking lot, but waste hauling. And as we have more legislation coming down the pike on mandated compost collection, it's a huge diversion for greenhouse gases and the waste stream. Lake Washington already has a step up with the amount of compliance and participation that they have. So you guys are in good position to move forward with those. Water bottle filling stations. In 2016, we started installing water bottle filling stations at secondary schools. And to date, we've had almost 750,000 water bottles equivalent filled through those water bottle filling stations and diverting that many plastic bottles from being used as single-time use plastics. And 19 schools have been certified by King County Green Schools for their commitment to reducing waste and recycling. We've had a lot of questions about how do we get students involved, and this is a really clear example where students are participating in doing an actual waste audit of their own facilities, reporting it back, identifying opportunities to improve on their waste diversion, which is how much trash and recycling and compost, how their percentages change over time, and how much of those divertible streams, so compost and recycling, is no longer part of their trash waste stream. And so 19 schools have been certified, which is a huge amount of compliance for a voluntary program. Any questions about waste?
Don't see any.
All right, moving right along, custodial and green cleaning. So another thing that happens primarily behind the scenes, there's a lot of chemicals, there's a lot of time that goes into making sure that our schools are clean and safe. And in 2012, the district took on a green cleaning initiative where custodians participated in a process to identify and reduce the number of chemical cleaners that were used and increase the use of paper products that were made of at least 40% post-consumer content. This culminated in changing the way that we clean our schools, and in 2017, they received an award from the American School and University magazine for their outstanding achievements. And although the green cleaning continues to happen in the background, the district was very well prepared to meet cleaning protocols that came about in 2021 with COVID. So there's just a huge commitment in the background and understanding about the impact that our custodial teams have, and they're well engaged with this, which speaks really highly of Lake Washington again. Grounds and pest management, another area that the community sees, but they don't necessarily know what's into those parts of our district. We talked a little bit earlier about irrigation and how emphasizing native plantings reduces the amount of water we have to apply to our landscaping. But grounds and pest management, particularly around pesticide application, is another area that the district has been looking at for a long time. We have 5 pesticide-free schools at Lake Washington. Brian can really articulate what that commitment requires. It's a lot more hand weeding. It's a lot more engagement from the teams. And it's really a huge effort to even have 5 pesticide-free schools in the district. There are also pesticide-free areas within the district that students have taken on to help maintain as well. Lake Washington is one of only 12 districts in the entire country to receive Excellence in Integrated Pest Management STAR certification. And this is a 37 criteria evaluation recognition that says they're doing everything possible to minimize the impact of the applications that they have to do, which both keep our grounds healthy and beautiful and vibrant and increase their longevity over time.
Yeah, I'll just mention.
Any questions here?
Yeah, I'll just mention for our pesticide-free schools, we have a pesticide-free agreement that we work with schools that are interested in being pesticide-free, where they sign up essentially a committee to perform primarily weeding in flower beds so that pesticides or pre-emergent isn't needed in those areas.
The schools that aren't the pesticide-free, are there efforts then to minimize the pesticide use in those areas? Because I think the fact that we only have 5 is going to sound very minimal to a lot of folks, although we're one of the top in the country. We also could use to know how we're trying to limit the others and how much less that is than our surroundings.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, all of our efforts as it relates to integrated pest management, and one of the reasons why we're recognized is because we limit the amount of pesticides, herbicides, all the sides that are needed to maintain the acreage that we maintain.
There we go.
All right, transportation. We've got lots of topics on areas that Lake Washington is doing really well and leading the way, but transportation is another area that is very publicly visible to your constituents and your students. So the big yellow buses that roll down the street, 75% of the Lake Washington School District fleet was built after 2007. This newer, more efficient buses significantly allows the district to minimize the amount of gas and the amount of tailpipe pollution that's coming out. So continuously increasing, prioritizing these newer, more efficient buses is a huge strategy that's been underway for many years. In 2018, they got a Washington Department of Ecology grant to purchase 16 new low-emission buses. This was an award of over $500,000, and increasing the number of these low-emission buses on the road resulted in a 99% reduction in overall fleet emissions. There's been a lot of investment in technology to make school buses more efficient. There's a lot coming down the pike about electrification of buses, but minimizing the emissions that come out of these gas-powered buses, newer technology has been really impactful. And so it's great that you have some buses on your street already doing this. In addition to prioritizing low-emission buses, all of the buses have been retrofitted with particulate exhaust filtration to further reduce emissions. So this is retrofitting existing systems to, instead of having to replace the whole bus, at least make the ones you have as efficient as possible. And then there's a people component to this. So training drivers to avoid idling, making sure that routes are as efficient as possible, cut down on those tailpipe emissions, and reduce your footprint as much as possible as well.
How much does the retrofit knock down our emissions? Do we have any idea?
Lauren, did you hear that? How much does each retrofit knock down the emissions?
I don't have that number. But we can probably find it.
It'd just be helpful when we talk to other groups that say electric only, which would love to have, but.
Yeah. And electrical only is exciting, and it's coming. There's just a lot to it on figuring out charging stations, and there's some money. King County Metro, we worked with them just to do a new charging station. They call it their Museum of Charging, because they put 5 different types of chargers in there to see what's going to be the most efficient, how it's going to work. So we're going to let them do a little bit of sampling on how that works. And they have buses constantly, so they need the rapid chargers, because there's chargers that can charge in an amount of time. There's rapid chargers that can charge quickly, so they can do another turn or be ready for an afternoon pickup. So yes, there's a lot in electric, but I think the district's done a really good job here doing something. There's a lot of districts that are like, I don't have electric yet, or I have one electric bus, and they're not doing anything with the rest. You've done a lot with the buses you have and the means you have now, while planning for what's coming with electric buses in the future.
Yeah, I'd also mention that all of our fleet, our yellow fleet and our white fleet, have GPS on all of our vehicles, and so we can optimize routing. We also can tell when vehicles are idling. And we've also installed no idle zones into all of our bus loops throughout the district.
All right, I want to bring it home with student engagement, which is the whole reason all of us are here every day working on these problems. I think the most prestigious award in the country at the moment is the U.S. Department of Education Green Ribbon Schools, and Lake Washington School District has been a national winner at the district level. So that's an extremely public accolades on the holistic approach that you're already taking. So congratulations on that. You also have 17 schools participating in the King County Green Schools Initiative this current school year. The number changes year to year, and we saw a lot of participation fall off during COVID. Really what this means is having an active green team that is working towards recognition through our local King County partnership, and they prioritize insight and participation in waste, water, energy, and student engagement in the schools. And I think there was a summary of the current school participation prior to Melissa's and my presentation this morning. But that is a great partnership that we've had for many years. And there's a lot of overlap and data sharing that we provide to those King County Green Schools participants. There's been a lot of initiatives. You guys went through these in more full detail, but student-led initiatives, student-led ideas, and participation in what can individuals do, both in their school and then bring home into their communities, is really fantastic at Lake Washington. Things like food share tables, walk and bike to school initiatives, particularly on days and months where that is emphasized, and then sustainability connections to district data. So again, using real school district data sets on how their buildings are performing, what their schools are doing, and then using those in lessons in the classroom is a great way to get students involved.
We have 17 schools, you're saying, that participate in the King County Green Project. Do we know, compared to other districts, how percentage-wise that compares? Are we ahead, behind, even? You see where I'm going?
Yeah, Lauren, do you know the around our neighboring districts how we compare?
Can you rephrase the whole question? I couldn't quite hear the first part.
So the question is, could you do a comparison between Lake Washington and surrounding districts in terms of King County Green Schools participation?
Yeah, I'd say, honestly, it's about on par with the others. There's usually about a quarter to a third of schools within a district that are really active. I think there's a pretty clear correlation between having a really excited staff member and green team success. And as that staff member changes schools, turns over, that success of that green team is directly related to that. And so generally, again, we're about at a third of the schools that have that individual identified. Where we have school districts where there's higher rates of participation, there is a larger structural expectation that says every school will have a green team. So I work with one school district. It's smaller than Lake Washington. So again, different scale of implementation, but it's an expectation that every school has a green team. They actually give an additional stipend to green team leaders to make sure that they have one in place, and it's part of their goals for the year. And so that structural support to say green teams are marching in the same direction, they have some expectations, and they're also funded by the district is one way to increase participation. Right now, King County Green Schools is voluntary. It's technically funded and organized through a third party, the King County Green Schools program, and individual schools sign up on a case-by-case basis, and it's really dependent on whether they have a champion in place at that site of how successful they will be.
And we will benchmark the data we shared earlier with this data just to make sure we understand what was being reported. So I'll follow up. Yep.
Oh, did you have
Yeah.
different numbers?
There's definitely, there's participation and there's certification on an annual basis of King County Green Schools. So you may have green teams that are active but not getting certified through King County Green Schools, and so the number continues to change on a yearly basis.
Of those, that organization that coordinates from the King County level, and they have, you said, funded these programs, do they also fund the stipend? I'm guessing no, but I'm just allowed to ask.
I don't think, Lauren, does King County Green Schools fund the stipend for, I think it's funded through the district,
Yes.
correct? Yeah. I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, that's a completely district level initiative. Yep.
Just one note before you change slides, Melissa. The Green Ribbon Schools, the district, the national award we won as a district, you can win that award once. And so it's not something ever.
So it's not like you won once.
Yeah, and we applied and were awarded on our first try.
Yep. Yeah. So it's not like you won once and haven't gotten in a few years. That's a really good point. You won on your first time. You got it. This is a really prestigious award. They give it out in Washington, D.C. Sometimes districts will go to D.C. to get it. It's a big deal. So individual schools can continue to apply. So if an individual school says, I want to win it on my own, they can continue to apply, but the district has won the district level, which is amazing.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah. Thank you. I can bring that up. I forgot. Thank you. Any other questions on this? And sorry, if your numbers are different on green teams, let us know. We can. Oh, sure.
I actually just was curious about the green teams or the green schools. At the school level, if a school were to apply and get the designation of a green school, Is it something that they have to continue to demonstrate to maintain, or is it a one-time you win?
Yeah.
You could have done the requirements that year and then.
Yes, but the way the application is structured is it's pretty intense. So it's not like you can just say, you know, I met a certain energy use this year, so I get it. They look for longevity of programs. They look for longevity of educational programs along with building programs. So you have to align, and why the district won it as a district level, you have to align that you have district participation. You have to align that you have things like building controls and things like that, that you're partnering with your utilities in a long-term way. They look at like this longevity of programs. So it makes it a little hard to say, like, we met it this year and that worked, because showing the district had been working with PSC, you know, for 15 years, you can't change that, you know. So they're looking at things that are staying static and this commitment to going forward. So yes, technically you could meet it once and then everything could blow up the next year, but it's unlikely the way they look at it that if you've been a partner with your utility for 15 years, you've been doing these things for 10 years, that next year it's just going to completely change.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Lauren, you may be able to talk a little bit more about the different levels of green teams that they can achieve. There's like a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3.
Yep, for the King County Green Schools program.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so the King County Green Schools program, yes, there's level 1, 2, 3, and then sustaining green schools. Basically, it's taking a focus on a 3-year track to say we're going to tackle waste, we're going to tackle water, we're going to tackle energy, and then also maintain all the actions that we've had in previous years to continue improving them and maintaining the savings that we've gotten. That is what will earn you, quote, certification for those different years. So you can participate in the program, but it's actually going through the process of documenting your savings, documenting your activities, and then documenting that you've maintained the things that you've set in place in the past that earns you that annual certification.
Yeah, and besides the green team leader that's based at the school, our program, the RCM program, provides support to those leaders and those teams to provide them with the data they need to help them with setting their goals.
Do we know how many other schools in the state of Washington have that Green Ribbon District certification? And for that matter, been taking it further than our borders, how many in the country really do it?
Lauren, do you know?
I'm trying to see how rare it is and how.
Yeah, that's a good question. Lauren, do you know? I know like schools that have won, but I'm trying to think on a district level.
I think I only know of one other Washington State district that has won.
Which one?
Tahoma.
Yeah, Tahoma. That's the one who does stipends for their green teams. Others, like Oak Harbor, and they have a lot of schools that have been in. I don't know that they've gotten district.
Yeah. The program has also been going on for quite a few years. So the fact that you can only win the district once, it may have been a handful of years ago that somebody won, and I'm just not aware. It's likely easy to pull up on the website. I'd be happy to look into it.
So it's time for us to go to individual schools then.
Yeah. All right. So, you know, we've talked about sustainability for years. The district obviously has had a very robust program for years. We see this coming up a lot lately just with climate change, right? Especially in the western United States, western Washington, you're seeing wildfire smoke, you're seeing other things. And Lauren and I were looking through, you know, some of the data from Lake Washington, you know, 10 years ago. We had some similar presentations where like it was such a focus, but it wasn't as intense, right? Because people weren't really feeling the effects yet. So I think there's this renewed focus, and it's not a fad, and it's not going to go away. And so I think as a district, what you're talking about is how are you going to take everything you're doing and make a plan, right? How do you want to communicate it out? We've talked over the last, couple of years, you see districts like Portland Public Schools, Seattle School District coming in with climate policies saying, by 2030, we're going to have 50% of our carbon reduced, and by 2040, we're going to be, net zero. these are large districts, so what we see as a trend is that these larger districts create a policy, put it out there, and then it starts kind of trickling down, right? So Lake Washington, I think we had talked a little bit about, hey, this is probably coming, that there's going to be a community focus and how the communication is released on what we're doing as a district. You have schools like Salt Lake City School District, they really didn't have a sustainability program, right? So where they're starting is kind of from zero. And then you have districts like yourself where you're very far along in sustainability and carbon planning, but how are you going to get to a plan that works for the district or a mission? There we go. So while we're talking through this, the path is pretty similar. Even if you're starting smaller or starting where you're at, is how are you going to systematically go through and decide what parts of the district you want involved, how you want to communicate it to your stakeholders. Typically, there's a process, a sustainability planning process, that you bring in experts with community stakeholders and talk through where you want to go. Carbon has been the big flashy thing that everyone's passing resolutions on, but as you see, it's part of a bigger sustainability process, right? So carbon planning is important. It's obviously what is fueling some of the climate crisis. However, there's other pieces that are very important as well. So as we think through that, curriculum and student engagement, everything we've been talking about today, how that rolls together to be a meaningful plan. Any questions about that? I know that that's kind of what today is about, but this is a lot of what we're doing with districts, like I said, from ground zero or from where you're at now, is putting this into an actual plan. And this has a lot of implications. How are we going to make decisions going forward? How are you going to incentivize certain things? How are you going to make decisions on building and planning? Some of the districts that have had carbon plans, it's great, but now they're going backward and their capital planning team is saying, well, gosh, I put in a gas boiler 2 years ago. Do I have to pull that out? So there's a lot of questions that come with it. So, thinking through these different elements and what the implications are is one of the most important things, because anyone can kind of come through and say, yep, we're going to be carbon neutral tomorrow. Well, what does that mean? Is it attainable? How do you get there? And then how do you make decisions along the way to reach your goals and implement those? So I think that's what...
I can answer that.
Yeah.
Thanks. So two things. One, we have not started a process to do this, and this is more, again, this is on the operational side, and so this is more of an overview of what are, and this is high-level process to actually come to something that there's broad agreement around. And so this was just, as we think about moving forward, like, how do we actually come to a resolution on what we're targeting, what we're agreeing is the focus, and something that, community staff can point to say, this is our effort. Like, this is what we're focused on.
Yeah, it wasn't a criticism. I just didn't know where the hell we're at.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Thank you. So then I think it comes to what's next for Lake Washington. So you've done all this, great work. Mark, you've talked about how do you communicate it out? Where do you want to go? Dr. Holman, you summed it up very well on, how do you want this to be your mission? How do you want to communicate it out with everything you've done? Carbon being an important piece, but how do you want to weave in the other pieces? And then there's funding sources. This also goes back to funding. There's Renew America Schools, which are some federal grants that were signed with the Inflation Act. A lot of it is on diversity scoring. So there's commerce grants. So Washington Department of Commerce has a lot of solar, battery storage, energy grants. The district has actually been really successful. We've gotten a lot of the commerce grants. They used to be much larger because there's so much participation. They're getting a smaller and smaller wedge to each district. And they're actually, the districts have to compete against any public entities. So that's hospitals, cities, counties, anything, any public entity. So the district has taken advantage of those already. There's more coming that are more aggressive around solar panels. Within the Inflation Act, there is a really interesting legislation passed where private entity used to get 30% refund on any solar panel you put in. They decided, well, if we're really going to get renewables going, we need public to participate as well. So as a public agency, instead of a tax rebate, you get just a check for any solar you do. It's 30%. There's no application process. There's no, do we win or not? You just get that for any solar you do. And then Washington State is coming around with other programs saying, we'll match that, like the 70% on the other end, and then trying to push battery storage. So instead of diesel generators, how you can have a solar panel connected to battery storage and have redundancy on battery storage. So and why I bring those up, those are specific ones. There's other programs out there that we're constantly trying to track for the district and figure out where you can get funding. But that also goes back to a plan and a mission, right? Where do we want to be? So how important is to go after certain grants, after certain funding, divert certain funds where if there is a matching on those grants, how that works over time, and from a lot of different sources. So that's just an example. Any other questions? Anything else? Turn off my camera. All right.
Lauren, did you have any final comments?
Yeah, actually one thing is obviously there's a lot of great work going on, and I think there's a huge opportunity first to, celebrate this more broadly within the district. A lot of times you've been mentioning communication, and there's a lot of opportunity to share the successes you all have had to date. And then there's this next stage, which is where do you want to go? And so setting idealistic and tangible goals and figuring out a process to drive those forward to implementation, and then throughout that whole process communicate it back to stakeholders. I think that's where we see Lake Washington having a lot of opportunity in front of you, and we're just here to help with lessons learned, perspectives from other districts, and expertise in this area, however you might leverage us the best.
Thank you so much for having us. Appreciate it.
I'd just like to take the opportunity to say thank you so much for coming and putting this all together. It was really great to be able to see it sort of tied up within this fashion of sort of the whole pieces, and appreciate the holistic concept because we do hear the pieces because those are the direct experiences, and so be able to think. And so now sort of where's the board's role now in helping to set sort of that component, and that's the piece that we'll move to and talk about as to where we want to play. But greatly appreciate this. Is great information to be able to utilize in many ways. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I also want to just
You're very
offer appreciation for Lauren and Melissa coming this morning. Your expertise and commitment to this work is demonstrated through how you talk about it and your passion for this work. And I look forward to ongoing partnership with you around this as we move forward. So thank you for spending a Saturday morning with us. I know you promised kids were going to come join us if you were remote, and I haven't seen that yet. But
I don't know if you want my 3 and 6 year olds.
So thank you both.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
I think
Thank you
Rick
so
was-
much.
Just a quick housekeeping question.
Go.
Lauren, Melissa, are you, I think you are you going to be sharing the slides that
Yeah.
were presented?
Yeah.
And then, Dr. Holman, can you post those to Board Docs? Excellent. I just think it'd be nice to have that
Yes.
available.
We'll put both presentations from today.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing up my questions.
Absolutely. Thanks. All right. Let us know if we can help in any other way.
All right, great. So the plan right now is we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and sort of do the discussion and next step and that. There is fresh coffee that was just made if anybody's looking for coffee. So, yeah.
Thank you, Lauren. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah. Take care. Bye.
Okay, we're ready to start.
And I forgot to mute the broadcast. Okay, Chris, we're back.
All right, we are back. So, with that, we just had the opportunity to hear quite a bit about efforts within our district and what's going on. And so now we have the opportunity, we have about 45 minutes to sort of talk about next steps and in regards to where is the board's role, what does the board want to do in going forward. So the key as we think about this discussion is to remember where the board's role is at, and so really thinking about policy and where that goes. I think John actually summarized well for me of sort of the options you have sort of laid out of where we could do, right? One is the board could do nothing. The board could choose to look at policy and revise policy in a certain way, and the board could choose to do a proclamation similar to what we did with equity. We could do a variety of different things on how we go forward from this, and so that's sort of the discussion point. But let's work to stay there and try to avoid getting into the operational components of saying specifically what's to be done, and really sort of work towards that component in policy if we can. Recognize that sometimes those pieces help to frame that as well, so recognize those components are together. So with that, what are your all take in what you just heard and next steps? Eric.
Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I went through what we currently have of our policies just to see where we've talked about sustainability at all. And I do think in facilities there is a reference, and I believe it to be the only reference in our policies. What's that? Yeah. And I think that's right. And I think it says, so it says that we will have a facility plan that establishes priorities for construction, renovation, maintenance projects that, among other things, ensure that facility plan and design decisions appropriately consider environmental impacts, include eco-efficiency and sustainability. And I believe that to be our only statement as a board in policy right now. And I guess when I think about the discussion of, when I hear the values that we talked about today in the discussion, I think that the interest of the board is broader. That's a pretty, to me, that's a pretty narrow subset that doesn't quite capture what I think the board's and the community's interest is in having a high-level policy statement. So, I don't know, should I keep talking? I don't want to monopolize the conversation. So I do. I mean, I think when I think about this, I think that I have an interest in expanding the scope of OE12. Right now, it is just facilities, and it's in terms of what we talk about facilities, it's also fairly narrow. I think I have an interest in expanding that to be to include, I guess, what I'll say, call it the built environment. I think is a term I've heard before to describe that. And I think transportation could fall in there as well. And if there's an opportunity there, if we were to expand the scope in that way, to have a broader board statement on what sustainability means in those. Because when I think about like what we've talked about today, is largely on what is the impact that we have, we as a district have on the environment. How can we do about it? There's a really neat definition in the very first slide today about what sustainability meant, but I thought it was I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was the best. It was the best distillation I've ever seen of it, and I think like that. Those are the concepts that we can embed in a broader policy. So, end of monologue for now. Thank you.
If I can just ask a quick follow-up on that. So for OE12, so you're saying that's specific to facilities and make it a little broader, OE12. So that's what you're looking at. How do we engage into that one?
I did not have my microphone on. Apologies. Yes, and one thing I left out of my monologue is we also, as a board, when I was looking through our policies, I do not believe we have anything that talks about transportation. And I think when we think about our overall sustainability efforts, a lot of the conversation, a lot of what we hear is about how transportation relates to that. Not just our fleet of buses, but the choices we make around transportation. So I think those, and I just feel like that concept is interlinked with what we do with facilities and the overall built environment.
Great, thanks. All right, Mark?
I think as we develop the new OE, if you will, that's more comprehensive, in addition to setting our goals, we need to be able to set where we're at to talk about our accomplishments to date and where we'd like to take it to. Because, again, I don't think anyone knows where we're at. I didn't before this presentation. And I think it's very important that we show that we've had an ongoing effort and we want to take it to a higher level, but yet we're not starting from zero. I think that's very important for our parents to know, our students to know, and policymakers for that matter.
Shivani?
I was just going to say I agree with that. I do think there needs to be more communication to kind of show that like everything the district has done to this point and everything that we hope to do to make sure that the community is more involved in this process. Additionally, I'm pretty sure they mentioned something about a district where they had funding for green teams, and I was wondering if that would be like able to be implemented in this district as well, to make sure that the longevity of those green teams are aided and that they're able to continue like their impact.
So I'm going to take a stab at putting that one place further and tell me if I'm wrong and if I misinterpret. So as you speak about the longevity is so that as things are looked at, and so let's make sure that we have strategies have potentials for longevity and continuity and have those structured into the system. Is that fair? Okay. Leah?
Thank you. I think everything that we've heard and learned today, which has been so much, is really showing kind of the breadth of sustainability in terms of areas that it can touch within the district, and it's not isolated to our buildings, it's not isolated to our students, it's not even isolated to their education or how they get to school, transportation. It really touches like every aspect of education, I feel like. Very similar to OE 14 and our equity policy, where we are having to look at our existing policies through a new lens of an equity lens, and I almost feel like sustainability isn't going to be an addition to an existing OE. It will have to be a different way of looking at making sure that we are thinking about sustainability in all aspects. And I don't know in terms of like of writing a policy, like a new single policy, I don't think is going to accomplish potentially what our goals are.
We talked about how in the past we found bits and pieces of our policy in various OEs, and they're kind of invisible. And it's great that we can have them spread out, but do you think that perhaps we'd at least be able to demonstrate our commitment to it if we have a separate OE with references to this takes place in this section, that section, and so forth? You see where I'm going?
Yeah, I worry that if we had like a standalone sustainability policy, like OE 15 or whatever, I think that you would end up with a lot of redundancy within our policies, because we would address things like facilities or transportation, but then we have OE 12, and we have other areas where it should actually be included, if that makes sense.
So if I'm following, you're sort of saying that you view it that possibly looking at all the policies and where a sustainability and sort of the issues and priorities and values, are they in there, or do they need to be built out or called out more in different things? I think the instructional program would be one that I would think of as a potential capacity, as opposed to a separate OE.
Yes.
Okay. Is that fair?
It is, with the caveat of I do think some sort of a resolution or a statement would also be necessary.
Okay, so Chris, I know you are up. Oh, we might have lost you.
No, we didn't. I'm just trying to put him on the screen so
Okay. Oh, good. He's not a talking head.
All right. So I think what we've seen today is some fascinating pieces. There's dimension that's curriculum. I really have no concern about writing specifics of curriculum into board policy. I think that's a bad idea. We don't write in specifics of how to teach math. So I'm comfortable with leaving the curriculum piece apart alone. I'm pleased to see what is being done. I was aware of 90% of it. What I wasn't as aware of is the efforts that have been put into walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And that's something that's a communications challenge. Again, I don't think that necessarily falls under board policy. I think that's something that belongs in the operational side of things, but it is definitely something where it's important that the community can see what we're doing in such a way that it's ongoing rather than a one-off. But as far as us writing a new OE, I'm actually kind of with Mark on this. There's a value, there's a set of values that are worth putting out there. I think it's worth the board actually, and here I agreed with Eric's statement, saying that, sustainability is making sure that what we're doing today ensures that future generations can also do it. We don't impact the ability of future generations. That is a great way to succinctly state the value of sustainability to the district. But beyond that value, there are only a few places that I see that it's important for us to incorporate into board policy. It's already in there for facilities, as has been noted. I think it probably should be in there explicitly for transportation. But those would be things where I like Mark's concept of if we were to write a new OE15, it would really just be a values statement plus cross-references to where it's actually implemented in our other policies, rather than being a independent, self-standing set of policies. So that's my take on it.
As I was listening today, it's helpful to hear the conversation because it also then helps to develop a mental framework. The definition around sustainability, I think there's two components for me. One is our responsibility today. One is our responsibility to educate, because it's through that education that we're actually affecting the future. So it's kind of both of those distinct responsibilities around we as adults have a responsibility because we actually can make modifications and changes to the system today to affect our footprint, if you will. But the other part of the responsibility is the 30,000 that we're educating each and every day. And if we don't do that well, then while yes, it's good we're taking our own responsibilities, we're doing well. We're doing things, that are actually making meaningful difference. But if we don't take the step of actually preparing and educating our students, then the long-term implications actually are reduced. Because we as a district can continue to refine our own internal processes and practices. But that's only one strand of what we need to focus on. So as I think about, the board considering what are the values, to me, those both are distinct and unique in and of themselves. They're not the same thing.
So I'm going to take a liberty here. So I do agree that for at least what I'm hearing in a piece of this and through this discussion is we are in agreement that sustainability and approach and actions in this area are valuable, and we should be continuing forward in which to build those into our policy and to promote these actions within our district. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That is a commitment from the board in which to be able to say that. We haven't written it or voted on it, but there's at least a consensus around that value. So I think that's important to lay out. I think that, how we do that within it. So it sounds like there is commitment to look at our policy and which way that we do that most effectively and to strengthen that. I know as I listen to this discussion, I know that the work plan and the action plan is a piece that is definitely operational. At the same time, I feel that is an important piece and valuable of that alignment, that there needs to be an alignment of activities and a vision. And so that's the pieces. Everybody was talking, a question that I had was, what are the values that you see going forward in relation to sustainability? I appreciated your comments, Dr. Holman, in regards to the curriculum, that it does matter how we provide this within our curriculum and education, because that's a component, and there is the operational side that we have on the other side. I actually think there might be a third one, and that is the community engagement piece within this, because this is such a integrated piece, and volunteers and our students are all very wanting agency within this, and this is a great opportunity to build that. So I think we have to think about that third rung, honestly, within that setting, as we look to how we build this in.
Agreed.
And that statement that she gave for a sustainable, absolutely. I thought that was great as sort of a sustainable development one. To think about that way as a global value, and then what falls under that. Whether we do it through revising policies we currently have, I think we can do those in different ways, but I do think having some clear statement or resolution around, which we did with, if you remember with equity, we had done that part where we did have a clear statement first in regards to why are we even talking about this? And why are we bringing this forward at this point in time? So we have that little summary at the top of OE14, which actually started with 3 pages prior as we then worked it down to that. This is one of those things. So I know Mercer Island actually did the approach where they did a resolution by their board in regards to the board is committed to do these things in regards to sustainability. The policy came after that. Actually, I don't think they have the policy yet, if I remember right, when I spoke to them. But that gives a commitment and then action to be able to work from at the board side. So those are all the pieces that I think. But what's great is it sounds like we're, yes, in agreement that this is something that we need to be working on, and that policy is something we want to look at how we strengthen.
Yeah. Yep. Wait, can you say that last part again before I just make sure I'm agreeing?
We want to strengthen the policy, whether that's
a board policy.
A board policy. I will admit, I'm not 100% sold that it should be a totally separate policy. I think the redundancy issue is more of a challenge where we can probably place it into its appropriate locations where we need to. But that's my take. So, Mark.
I agree with Chris when he says that communicating this is really the process of communication really is a administrative role, but that's in creating the communications, I think. In carrying out the communications, I'd like to see, because our community doesn't think the board is involved in this issue, that we're not leading in this issue. And so I think that if we have presentations to PTSAs or to other organizations outside the educational realm, that perhaps it ought to be a partnership between a staff person and a board member, if at all possible, because that way it shows the board's commitment to the issue as well as the staff person, because it's apparent in those communications that our public doesn't always separate the two, and I think it's important for them to see our commitment to the issue as much as it is for the staff commitment to it, and the staff commitment is more of a subject matter expert, whereas we can talk from the policy aspect.
So I'm torn as to whether or not we should embed at this point or have a standalone policy. And there's a couple of pieces that I've been thinking about. The ideal is that we don't have an OE14, that it is just embedded and infused in the system, and it is just the way we practice. It's the way we act. It's the beliefs that are infused through the system. One of the things that is beneficial to OE14 is that the board distinctly talks about our work around anti-racism, anti-discrimination, inclusion and equity in education. And so I'm kind of debating about whether or not the effort to have a sustainability policy that we then have to muddle through to figure out how do we meaningfully connect it to other policies, because then it gives the board an opportunity to actually specifically discuss a set of data around sustainability at a minimum annually, and then you've seen how as we've developed board policy, we've developed administrative policy, we have a different staffing level for equity. You saw the program report from the Equity and Family Engagement team the other night. We would not have been able to provide that level of kind of systems work 5 or 6 years ago around equity. And so, I hear the board talking about this as a value, and I hear from everything that was reported today, it's a system that it's a value that the system holds already. And so, sharing that story and sharing those celebrations, but also just demonstrating our commitment to that work, that responsibility, and really, Shivani, what word did you use? I wrote it down. Longevity. Because if we don't build it so that it's for the long haul, then, again, it's meaningless work. And we're just spinning our wheels today, and then, who's ever here tomorrow doesn't continue that forward. And so really wanting this to be meaningful to the organization and our community in the long term. I know I know both Siri and Leah met with a group of community members who have been engaged in this work for years, and so we have a community that is primed to partner with us to an even greater degree at the systems level, not just at our school level. So I say all of that because having a distinct standalone policy, there's benefit to that as well. And the caveat to that comment, to create a policy that identifies the values, articulates it well. You saw how long that took with OE 14. And so the idea or concept about the board having a public statement, proclamation, whatever it is also a nice action that the board can take, because it essentially publicly demonstrates to the community, here is where our current thinking is, and this is our commitment to this work, and it's a work in progress. But at least we've stated some of the values that we can point back to, both organizationally and you as board members. So that's some of my thinking. And I haven't landed on where I believe the policy work should go. I guess I would lean towards a sustainability policy. And then if we find that is not manageable, I'd rather take that and embed it into other policies. But that's kind of where I am today, because if it's a true value and we're truly committed to it, it may be nice to document that. I mean, we're going through that work right now with OE 14, trying to make those meaningful connections, not do double reporting to the board. But it's worth it because it's that important.
I'm also torn, and I'm leaning towards the opposite of not having an individual policy. And something that you said reinforced it just a little bit for me, and it's that if we have it as a standalone policy, if it's OE 15, and we would revisit it annually, focus on the sustainability and the reporting specifically around sustainability, that's great, but I don't think that addresses the sense of urgency that we're hearing from the community, that this is not something that you want to look at once a year. This is something that you need it's living and breathing and making sure that it's embedded in everything that we do. So when we're talking about instructional programs, and we're talking about our facilities, when we're talking about our budget, it should be coming up in all of those conversations. Therefore, I think it makes more sense to embed it in everywhere that we think that it deserves to be. so that it can be brought up more frequently, if that makes sense.
I would, my only alternative comment is, how often are we talking about equity? I don't think there's a board meeting topic that goes by that we're not referencing issues of equity. And so I don't disagree. Like, I'm torn. I don't, and I honestly am fine either way. So.
I think, John, you made a perfect case for why we need to have a standalone policy. It's not, and whether we report it quarterly, hourly, or annually, doesn't really matter. I mean, the idea, if at a minimum you're going to do it annually, but that doesn't mean you're not updating even more often, especially given project X, Y, or Z. As John pointed out, we had the essential elements of the equity policy, thank you, in our policies from the get-go. But they were so spread out and dispersed that they were camouflaged. And it also didn't enable us to really hone in on making sure they were getting accomplished because they were so disparate. I think you've made a case for the idea, as Chris had mentioned, the idea of references back to the other sections. But at the same time, by having a specific section, it doesn't get lost. We don't hide it from the community so they have to go to 5 different sections to try and figure out what in the world we're doing, because they're not going to do it. It has to be right up front where they can see it. Whether or not it goes away then and disperses into the other policies, same can be said for any of the other policies we have, whether it be equity or whatever. Whether it ends up being embedded into the other policies in the future doesn't matter. And the idea of having a resolution does not negate the idea of having a policy. I think they can go hand in hand, to be quite frank, and one actually kind of amplifies the other.
Okay, so my perspective from this, from at least a student perspective, is I do think that there should be a separate policy, I guess, that addresses sustainability, because sure, it is embedded, but I'm like looking at the policies right now and there's so many subsets of each policy, and I think it would honestly get lost in every single thing that we have to talk about. And making it separate also reinforces the entire, like what we were trying to do, which is create a plan that could also last long and a plan that actually is cohesive and specific enough. And by making it a separate policy, you're forced to basically do that. So I guess in that way, it's going to push forward like the initiative, because I think with the urgency that we have right now, I do think that having like a separate policy would be better in terms of community involvement and stuff as well. So that's my perspective on it.
Thank you. Chris?
So, taking what Shivani just brought up, the value in having it be its own policy is fundamentally that when someone comes to our policies, currently, if you do a word search for sustainability, you find one sub-policy buried deep under facilities. If we had an actual self-standing policy that is the values statement, then that actually helps channel the enthusiasm that somebody is coming to us and asking, what are we doing about sustainability, in a productive direction rather than in a direction of being angry at us for burying it in the details. So that's, I'm with Shivani in that having a self-standing values statement, I don't know that there need to be bullets underneath it that are not references into our existing policies for where it's implemented. But really just having the self-standing values statement would be a way that people who come looking for something will find something that means something to someone who's already got a bee in their bonnet. A lot of the statements that we looked at the beginning of the meeting involve people who think that we're actually not doing anything. And that's where meeting that head on with actually we're doing a lot and not telling them they're wrong, that we can't do more. I want to always be open to criticism or input on things that we can do and do better. I mean, honestly, personally, I had not run into this food share table thing. When I was a student, I would have loved it now that I've looked it up online. But this is something that it wouldn't have been on my radar. And I'm glad that somebody has brought this up and that is partially implemented. On a public health level, I've also got a little bit of, oh my God, my head's going to explode. Yeah. Anyway, it's all something where, to me, the value in having it as a statement, as a standalone, is actually helping channel enthusiasm into supporting and improving on ongoing efforts, rather than fighting against something that isn't actually there to be fought against. I mean, why are you against composting? We're not against composting. Why are you? I mean, it was interesting seeing the piece on the IPM certification, where pest management, it really is true. You can go pesticide free, but if you want to do that, either A, you have to live with dandelions, or B, you have to have an army of dandelion pickers, one or the other. And channeling enthusiasm towards helping us pick the dandelions is useful. So again, this is something I feel like it's a useful way to channel enthusiasm from the community to say, yes, we are doing things. Here's where you can help us, rather than them trying to decipher where there's something they can do.
Any other comments, questions? Director Liberty.
I still agree with myself from earlier, and I'm just going to say it again, where I think we should expand the scope of OE, the facilities, the existing facilities, operational expectation to be broader and encompass the values that we want to say about sustainability. And I also agree with Director Bleasner that it makes sense to say something specific about that in relation to separate in our other existing OE for communication engagement with the community about making a reference to sustainability efforts. And I think we can also embed it in the OE 11 for instructional programs. So I agree with my earlier opinion, and I agree with both what Director Bleasner and Director Choi said about embedding elements in our existing operational expectations.
So,
sorry.
No, go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you
I
off.
actually want to hear what you have to say first.
Well, as I'm hearing this, so my one thought that I go through is, it'd be interesting for us to, what are those value statements or policies that we would even want to consider regardless of where they end up, right? But even just having a list of those, and then there can sort of be that discussion, I mean, I'm thinking you could just change the title of facilities, OE 12, change the title, and you could start to broaden that out in other ways. But maybe that doesn't work that way because we have other things under facilities that we want to have. But I think that's our first step, honestly, and that's where having a resolution or proclamation starts to sort of lay out those values into that place. So then we break those through there, and then where they end up, be it a separate policy or embedded, can come at that point. I don't think that decision needs, but I think we have to decide what are those values that we're going to put forward as part of sustainability. Because we've had, you have, is it having an action plan that goes forward and have that laid out? Is it having, we have electricity, food waste was another, food security was a piece that came up through this. You have multiple angles. So how do we want to lay that out as values? Does that make sense?
Well, so clearly other areas are tackling this through a commitment for carbon emissions, right? And then the plan is then to how are they going to get there? And then that is the operational component that is somewhat flexible. I guess a decision of whether or not we want to commit to a certain level of carbon emissions by a certain amount of time would be something that we would have to discuss. And probably the easiest starting point of that conversation.
Mark?
This conversation about whether to have separate versus embedded in the others, is giving me a sense of deja vu when it came to the equity policy. And, beg your pardon?
I was trying to table that and move on.
Well, we can't really, because the idea is that if you have it embedded, it is hidden to the point the same way the equity was hidden. And it doesn't demonstrate the district's commitment to or the district's level of acknowledging the importance of a given issue. Whether all the meat is in other places and you have references back to it, to me it doesn't matter. It's the idea that you have to be very visible what you're doing or you haven't done it.
Director Carlson. Did you hear me? Okay.
Yep. So the carbon emissions, so Director Choya, I think getting into a carbon emissions target is us getting too close to the details. And here's why. There were several things that we saw today that would be extremely difficult to quantitate as carbon emissions, and yet I feel fall squarely under sustainability, particularly, for example, herbicide use. How do you quantitate the carbon emissions impact of not using herbicides to keep our lawns dandelion free? I'm hesitant to commit to a target on that. I think a broader statement that we are interested in sustainability and not leaving impacts for future generations is a more appropriate place for the board to be at. So
the carbon emissions was just an example of a starting point of that conversation and one area of sustainability that we have very concrete examples in governments and districts where that is the approach and kind of the starting point in how they're tackling it. And so it's easy not to have to create the wheel. And I didn't mean it as an all-encompassing definition of our approach to sustainability at all.
I guess I would say similar to the presentation, it was one part. And that was just one value you were putting forward of reduction of carbon footprint. Director, no, you're not Director Holman, you're Superintendent Holman.
Could I offer what I believe may be next steps?
We always like that.
It seems like it would be beneficial for us to set time aside at the March extended retreat to do really the work around identifying the values that then the board could decide this could spin into a proclamation type thing while we continue the policy work. And those values will kind of help as a framework for the board to communicate with, to community, to talk about it. It's the language that you would start to expect as we're talking about staff presentations. Those values would really be helpful as we think about moving forward. And then that could be a springboard. And time is always beneficial. So we have this conversation today. We will walk away from this and we'll ruminate about policy, which I know that's exciting. Okay, I will ruminate about policy. And we continue this conversation because this is the first conversation. I've never heard this conversation with the board before around sustainability, and so taking some time to reflect and then come back to that conversation, I think is beneficial. And so for me, the next step is set time aside in March to really do a deep dive into the values piece of this for the board, and then determine which direction we go.
Yes, I agree with that. What I was going to say earlier before Director Louise interrupted me is that I would have a hard time today, I think, cogently articulating what I value, and I need more time to think about, to feel comfortable articulating that I'm getting it right. So for myself, so yes, I would like to do that.
Other thoughts on that?
I would love to further discuss kind of the value of dedicated funding around sustainability and how that solidifies the concept of longevity and structure around our goals. if that could be part of that discussion as well.
Other thoughts? So I'm not hearing any, but it sounds like people are in agreement that that is so the other piece that's there, we have copies of several other, we've been sent links, we have them, and we'll forward those out again, of other policies and things that have done in other districts. They actually held up quite a few different plans and different things that in this slideshow as well. We'll send those, so those are just some that you can see how it's been laid out in other places as well as you think through that. I think that would be beneficial, and we can put that together. And so it sounds like we are in agreement that, yes, we want to move forward in working with these things. And as I say that, I want to thank our community members and all their work in voicing this as well, and actually all their work day to day in making all those great things we saw happening, and our staff who've been doing this as well. And thank you all for putting that all together. That's been great. So as we then now take this, we'll take these pieces, we'll move in for March when we have our 3-day process, and be able to talk through those values at that time. But we will provide you those links to be able to catch up on that too. And I think that's it. Anything else for the good of the order? Hearing none, I want to say thank you all for coming. Enjoy your Saturday morning for the next 10 minutes that you have, and then your afternoon. And then we will see you actually Monday is our next board meeting at 5 o'clock is our study session. Our board meeting will be at 7 that night. So thank you.